I just love that. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us this evening. Before we move into the bulk of the meeting, you'll notice there's a spare chair next to me. We don't have a vice chair this evening, and therefore I need to have a vice chair for one of the applications that's coming forward later. Our Vice Chairman, Councillor Van der Boer, is unable to attend the Planning Committee this evening. Therefore, I move that Councillor Blackburn be elected as a temporary Vice Chair for the meeting this evening. Can I please have a member second that, please? Thank you. Are there any other nominations? No, jolly good. Therefore, we agree that Councillor Blackburn will be the Vice Chair for this meeting and chair agenda item number 10. So you'd like to join me, Councillor? I am Councillor Liz Brown and I will be chairing this committee meeting this evening, and I will be supported by the temporary Vice Chair, Councillor Colette Blackburn, and the professional officers. Thank you for attending, and may I remind members of the public this is not a public forum for you to ask questions or challenge the points raised during debate by officers or members of the committee. You must not engage with other members or call out during the meeting. If you've requested to speak, when invited to do so, it's important that you keep to your allotted time, especially this evening as we have a considerable number of speakers. Your time will be monitored and you will be prompted to conclude your comments as we approach the end of your allotted time. Your comments and discussion points must be relevant to the application the committee is considering. We're not expecting a fire drill this evening, so should you hear the alarm, please make your way to the nearest exit, which is the rear of the chamber, and we assemble outside the Lynn Cross Public House. May I also ask council members of the public, please turn off mobile phones and other electric devices or turn them to silent. And remember to turn on your microphones before speaking and turn them off when you have finished. Members, when you are voting, please make sure your arm is clearly raised so that we can accurately capture the vote. I also remind members on the committee you cannot vote on applications within your ward. I also remind everyone here this evening, excuse me, please show respect to one another throughout the meeting, especially as this is being live streamed. Please refrain from any personal comments relating to the officers or members of the committee. Before we proceed, could the officers here this evening please introduce themselves, starting with the officers on my right.
I'm Guy Brest, the Applications Team Leader.
Dan Holmes, Senior Planning Officer.
Sam Whitehouse, Planning Officer.
Nick Pettifer, Senior Planning Officer.
Emma Park, the Head of Development.
Claire Brown, Principal Planning Solicitor.
Judy Carboni, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you very much. Item 1, apologies for absence and notification of substitute members. Do we have apologies for absence? And are there any substitutes?
We have apologies for absence from Councillor Peter Van der Boer and Councillor Roger Noel, and Councillor Josh Potts will be substituting for Councillor Noel tonight.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of March 2026. Do we all agree I can sign these as a true and accurate reflection of the meeting? Agreed? Thank you very much. Declaration of members' interests. There is no need to record that you're unable to vote because we're aware of the local ward members who can't vote on particular agenda items. Are there any other declarations of interest? No? Okay. Oh, Councillor Trollope, yeah.
Just in relationship to the land west of Parsonfield Stables, I did go do an unofficial site visit, and I accidentally met the applicant, but we didn't discuss the application in any detail. So I feel that I'm unbiased.
Okay, thank you very much.
Richard.
Agenda item number 10. Pickhurst Lane.
Correct.
Thank you. I've already mentioned, as I am ward councillor for agenda item number 10, DC 251371, and can't vote on this application, the vice chair will chair this item. I shall assess our progress close to 8 p.m. as council meetings should not exceed 3 hours without the consent of councillors present at the meeting. The council meeting will not conclude partway through through an item of business. So as they say often on the telly, I've started, so I'll finish. If any motions or recommendations on the agenda remain to be dealt with, a motion to adjourn must be moved to reconvene the meeting to deal with any remaining business. So we'll ask for that vote close to 8 o'clock. Throughout the committee meeting, I shall allow for at least one comfort break. And I think there will be, for members, there will be sandwiches. Thank you. Moving on to item number 5, the first application is DC 251697, Billingshurst Business Park, land at grid reference 5092929126746, Stain Street, Billingshurst. Please could the officer present the application to committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. By way of an update, we've received a late representation from the developer of the land to the east at Hill and House regarding the public right-of-way. In summary, the representation submits that the application should upgrade the remaining section of public right-of-way to enable year-round pedestrian access, wheelchair use, pushchair use to a 3-metre width, enable permissive cycle use of the section within the applicant's control, allow access from the public right-of-way through the application site to the trade park for all users, not just residents of the application site. Allowing wider access from the public right-of-way through the site would show alignment with paragraphs 115 and 117 of the NPPF, as well as HDPF Policy 40 and Bill 12 of the Billingshurst Neighbourhood Plan. Providing onward connectivity along the public right-of-way, with the southern section of the public right-of-way being upgraded as part of the consented development under the Hill and House application, which is DC 240749. We've also received representations from the applicant regarding the planning condition requiring access to the public right-of-way, which I will discuss in more detail shortly. The application before members concerns a site at the northern edge of Billingshurst and takes in the remaining undeveloped portion of the Billingshurst Trade and Business Park, also known as Phase 2, as well as part of the adjoining field to the south. In context, the red line shows the application site with the existing trade park shown in green, which represents an existing employment commitment. Marked on the plan is the adjacent Lidl supermarket, the Shell garage and the building supply DW9 located to the west of the site, and the public right-of-way to the east. To the southeast is a portion of the southern field which secured permission recently for the erection of a new building and yard for a custom coach works company. This is in the blue outline. While to the southwest is a group of redundant barns which also benefit from extant permission for redevelopment to form small and medium business units, which is the brown outline. And that remains extant until May next year. As you can see, the built-up area boundary of Billingshurst extends around Phase 2 of the site, but excludes the southern parcel of land, which therefore remains in the countryside. Billingshurst is considered to be a Tier 2 settlement with a good range of services and facilities to support its residents, and it also acts as a hub to smaller surrounding settlements. Here are some site photos from the north over the hedgerow. This is the site seen from the south across Tilland Road, and from within the estate roads itself. So you have access by DW9 and then alongside the garage. This is the site in context shown as an aerial. You can see here a couple of pointers marked on, for example, the Hill and Barn site, the Hill and House site, the public right-of-way, which is yellow dotted. And the built-up area boundary is shown as a blue dotted line for context. The application comprises 3 elements. The first is 1,338 square metres of employment floor space, which is the small purple block, sought in full on the residual phase 2 land that lies within the built-up area boundary. The second element is up to 102 residential properties in the orange block, sought in outline only, and on the residual phase 2 land, with access from the existing estate road by the Lidl and the Shell garage, also within the built-up area boundary. The third element is for up to 5,605 square metres of employment floor space, which is the larger purple block, sought in outline only, with access from the existing estate roads to the side of the DW9 building. This site lies outside of the built-up area boundary. These are the plans and elevations for the employment units 16A, B and C, which are sought in full and which match the scale and design of the existing units within phase 1 of the trade park. They are similar to what's been approved for this parcel and phase 2 in general under the reserve matters. Alongside the parameter land use plan for the outline elements, there is also a height parameter plan that seeks to secure height zones within the site, closely matching the consented height zones of the employment development across phase 2. It is important to note that the proposed development will be more closely aligned to the natural ground levels across the site rather than the consented development, which necessitated substantial cut and fill works to create large development plateaus in phase 2, intended to help mitigate against their visual massing on this edge of village location. For comparison, officers suggest that Zone 1 is broadly equivalent to 2.5 stories, Zone 2 is approximately 3 stories, and Zone 3 would be approximate to a 2-storey development. This is an indicative master plan for the site, and you can see some sections in the bottom corner which provide a framework for the heights across the sloping site. The indicative layout shows connection points to the public right-of-way along the eastern side and a locally equipped play area in the northeast corner, set within landscaped, vegetated perimeter boundaries. Secured by way of condition will be the retention of a hedgerow and landscape buffer along the site's northern boundary, which has previously been identified as a bat flight path and having hazel dormouse habitat potential. The retention of this hedgerow along the northern boundary and its reinforcement were part of the previous conditions and parameters secured for this portion of the site under the consented development. Officers therefore consider that the northern boundary should be consistently retained and enhanced as part of any approved development. Details of layout, design, massing, scale and landscape would be subject to subsequent reserved matters applications and are therefore indicative at this stage only of how the development quantum could be achieved across the site. As mentioned at the start of the report, the applicant is proposing access to the public right-of-way, but only insofar as allowing residents of the proposed development site to access the public right-of-way by way of a gated access point. Members of the public would therefore be allowed access to the locally equipped area of play, the LEAP, from the public right-of-way only. As you can see, the current drafting of condition 27 in yellow by officers would require unimpeded public access from the public right-of-way through the site and beyond, facilitating safe, suitable access to the site for all users, enhancing the use and connection to the public right-of-way, and creating sustainable travel links for pedestrians and cycles, in line with paragraph 96, 105, 115 and 117 of the NPPF. However, the applicants have instead proposed an alternative condition set out in green, which restricts wider public access. So I'll leave that up there for a moment to read through.
Councillor Franklin, yes.
Could the officer just read those, because it's a bit difficult to read them from here. Thanks.
So the drafted condition 27 in the committee report before members states, no part of the development hereby permitted shall be first occupied or brought into first use until such time as unimpeded public access has been provided between the site and the public right-of-way 1942. The unimpeded public access shall be retained as such at all times thereafter. The applicant's suggested condition reads, No part of the development hereby permitted shall be first occupied or brought into first use until such a time as unimpeded public access has been provided between the leap and the public right-of-way, 1942. A gated access for occupiers of the permitted development, the subject of this application, between the site and the public right-of-way, 1942, shall also be provided prior to first occupation of the dwellings hereby approved. So the following slide just sets out the application site and the connectivity in relation to the Billingshurst Village and the established public rights-of-way network, which are in green. So the red dotted lines are part of the application before members right now, and the blue dotted lines are part of the consented public right-of-way and permissive cycle and pedestrian paths that were approved as part of the adjacent development at Hilland House. As set out fully in the report, officers are aware that the residual portion of Phase 2 benefits from extant permission for the development of up to 14,075 square metres of floor space, with only 994 square metres having been delivered to date at the DW9 unit. The full element of the proposal will deliver 1,338 square metres of employment floor space within the consented use classes and within the site's boundaries. The outline housing development would contribute significantly to the district's housing supply position, with up to 102 units proposed for this site. As the site lies within the defined built-up area boundary, there is support in principle for housing development on this site. Members will also note that the report refers to the applicants being in discussion with a housing provider regarding the possibility of bringing the site forward as 100% affordable. The Section 106 agreement, which has been drafted to an advanced stage between parties, would therefore capture this flexibility, along with securing new bus stops along Stane Street. However, the delivery of housing on Phase 2 land is balanced against the loss of delivering employment floor space within the consented Hilland Trade and Business Park. Over the preceding 7 years, the applicants have sought to progress this site with a number of revised permutations to the site plan involving smaller enterprise business units approved along the eastern side, and variations in the mezzanines within the units, allowing greater flexibility in the overall employment offer of the site. Some of the reserved matters applications came forward with operator-specific requirements which indicate interest in a number of parcels across the site. Furthermore, pre-commencement conditions have been discharged within the site, meaning that development could be implemented as permitted. We have also been provided with marketing details of the units and the site to date. As officers, we understand that the employment market has evolved since the original permission was granted on this site in 2019, along with an increased build costs and post-COVID caution within the market, added to which the consented development would rely on significant cut and fill works and retaining engineering operations to create development plateaus, which would accommodate the large warehouse-style units and the parking and delivery yards. By contrast, the proposed residential development would be more closely aligned with the existing ground levels within Phase 2, whilst the land to the south of Phase 2 is shallower in nature and would require less invasive groundworks. Overall, there would be a net loss of employment floor space delivery as a result of the proposed proposal, calculated at being some 6,138 square metres within Phase 2, with the proposal delivering a smaller quantum of employment floor space across the two parcels. As set out in the report in more details, officers consider that the redeployment of a large part of the residual Phase 2 site for housing would contribute towards the district's housing need, and takes into account paragraphs 124, 127, 128 of the NPPF in relation to the reuse and reallocation of underutilised land and more effective use of sustainable sites. The proposal would continue to deliver employment potential within the district against the objectively assessed needs. Officers do recognise that the development on the southern field is not part of an allocation, as it falls outside of the defined built-up area boundary, and that as such there is a policy conflict, which we've acknowledged. However, the proposed development would deliver a rational use of this portion of land, which is partly screened by an earth bund to the south and framed by consented development to the east and west, as well as the run of pylons, and therefore provides justification for the proposed outline commercial development on this plot. When seen in combination with the employment floor space that has been allowed directly adjacent to the site under separate applications, the wider potential for employment floor space in this location would be around 11,500 square metres, so resulting in a net loss of around 2,500 square metres. In line with the report and the suggested conditions, the proposal is recommended for approval, subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call the first speaker this evening, Alex Marshall, please. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, members. I'm Alex Marshall, the Development Director of Dunmore, the owners of the site. Firstly, I'd like to quickly touch on the late representations. Apologies to members for that. We ourselves only received the neighbours' representations yesterday, and the crux of the message sent round earlier was to effectively set out that we believe that they're trying to get a public right of way on our land to renege on their own consented right of way that they are mandated to put in as part of their application. This is going to put unwanted burden on our site, and to note it wasn't required on any of the previous consents we've had on our site, this particular obligation. Your officers have recommended this application for approval, and I want to focus on the delivery of this site. For us, this application is about continuing what we're already doing at Billingshurst, delivering jobs, but now also bringing forward much needed homes. We're currently the only developer to have delivered any new employment space in Billingshurst in the last 10 years. We've supported local businesses expand, such as EVM, Nye Builders, All Saved Fire, and Billingshurst Tyres. This has already created well over 140 local jobs, and this application will build on that. Whilst the front part of the site, along with its infrastructure, was delivered quickly on the flatter land, progress across the remainder of the site has slowed down due to the steep topography on what was referred to as Phase 2. This has required a more practical approach, including remaster planning the site to focus employment uses on the flatter areas where it's both viable and deliverable. This approach has already been recognised and supported by this committee and the Parish Council through the approval of the new EVM facility on the southern part of the site shown by the case officer. The employment element of this proposal now seeks to relocate the remaining employment alongside EVM where it's flat. This will ensure that jobs can be delivered in this location that works and supports for both existing and future businesses. Separately, this approach allows the challenging, more steeper part of the site, which are difficult for the employment use, to come forwards for much needed housing, all within the built-up area boundary and within the established residential context of Billingshurst. There is a clear and acute need for homes in the district, particularly affordable, and this site provides a real opportunity to help meet the need in a sustainable location. The proposal is about delivering jobs and homes, but doing it in the right place and in the right way. The mixed-use scheme is the most straightforward and comprehensive way of delivering both jobs and housing.
Could you bring your comments to a conclusion, please?
In the built-up area boundary. We're committed to this site, and we hope that you can follow the case officer's recommendation and support this scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Roger Welchman, and you also have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to address you this evening. The application has been the subject of close working with your officers over an extended period, including the submission of a pre-application inquiry at around this time last year. This has helped to shape the current proposals to achieve the successful completion of this site. Up to 100 homes and 3 small business units are proposed on the northern part of the site within the built-up area boundary. As recorded in the committee report, this element of the proposals are in accordance with the development plan and a preferred sustainable location for development. They will make a positive contribution to addressing the council's shortfall and boost the supply of much needed affordable homes. In responding positively to the advice of officers at pre-application stage and through this application, the mix of homes has been developed such that it aligns directly with the evidence of the type of homes which are needed, and this can be carried forward through the reserve matters submissions. The employment floor space at the southern end of the site will strengthen and expand the employment floor space to be delivered at this flatter part of the site. It will sit next door to the new EVM workshop, which was granted by committee in October last year and is being delivered. The employment floor space sits just beyond the built-up area boundary. However, as noted at paragraph 6.33 of the committee report, the land is defined on 3 sides by the built-up area boundary, with the EVM permission to the 4th eastern side. It's an island of undeveloped land in a sustainable location, surrounded on all sides by development, and is considered a suitable new location for the proposed development. The highway impacts of the proposals have been robustly tested, informed by a comprehensive programme of traffic surveys. This has included assessment of schemes already consented and in the pipeline to fully understand the cumulative effects on the local highway network. This has all been reviewed by the Highway Authority, who raised no objection to the proposals. With regard to drainage, the residential proposal will have a significantly less impermeable coverage than a consented employment scheme, consisting of large format units and large surfaced yard areas. The residential scheme includes provision for permeable garden areas and undeveloped green space, with a clear betterment in drainage performance. The mandatory 10% biodiversity net gain is secured by condition. Where required, this will be supplemented through the use of biodiversity net gain credits. The positive combination of much needed new homes and employment generating new commercial space is the kind of application which national policy indicates should be supported, where this will help meet identified development needs, including housing. As reflected in the committee report and following comprehensive assessment by your officers, all relevant matters are considered to be acceptable, with final details to be agreed at
You
reserve
bring your
matters
comments to
stage.
conclusion, please.
I would therefore respectfully request you support your officer's recommendation to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Turn the microphone on. I'd like to invite Laura Ecott, please. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm here this evening on behalf of a nearby landowner who supports the application in principle, subject to the continuation of constructive discussions regarding the public right-of-way 1942. I have registered to speak this evening to reinforce the matters set out in the letter circulated to members ahead of this meeting, and to respectfully ask that 2 specific issues are revisited before this application is determined. These issues relate to the treatment of public right-of-way 1942 and the mechanisms by which obligations relating to it are secured. Members will be aware that the application includes planning conditions requiring a connection to public right-of-way 1942, which runs along the eastern boundary of the site. That principle is fully supported. However, our concern relates to how this connection is delivered and whether the current approach fully realises the opportunity available to create a benefit for local residents and follow good master planning practice. Firstly, we respectfully suggest that the obligation to deliver the public right-of-way connection should be secured through the Section 106 agreement rather than condition alone. Given the importance of this route to sustainable movement and permeability, a Section 106 mechanism would provide greater certainty, enforceability and alignment with other adjoining permissions that have already secured similar obligations in this way. Secondly, we ask members to consider strengthening the obligation so that the relevant section of public right-of-way is upgraded to a 3-metre wide surfaced route incorporating permissive cycle rights. This would ensure continuity with the sections of the route already upgraded to the south through the Persimmon development and the other adjacent developments. The site to the east is likewise obligated to deliver such improvements along the adjacent section of this route. In this context, it is both logical and good master planning practice for this application to deliver the final section to the same standards, thereby completing a coherent and integrated pedestrian and cycle route linking North East Billingshurst to the business park and wider amenities, supporting sustainable travel in the village. It should be noticed that West Sussex County Council's Public Rights of Way officer agrees with this position and supports the proposed obligation to upgrade Public Right of Way 1942 through the Section 106 agreement. Further opportunities to improve the visibility of this route through fence upgrades and hedgerow maintenance on the adjacent site have also been discussed and supported by both the local landowner and the public rights of way officer. It is therefore recommended that this application adopts these upgrades in order to meet the test of sustainability, which should be met by any application of this nature. In our view, members have a clear opportunity today to secure a genuine community benefit and help deliver modal shift away from car use by enhancing the pedestrian and cycle network in this part of the village for years to come. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Faye Algar, Billingshurst Parish Council. Move on. Okay, if she comes, we've got to speak. But... Okay, I understand that she may well be late, but I'll move on. Invite the officers to respond to any comments that have been made so far. Thank you.
Just to pick up on the public rights of way, the section within the site, the upgrading, is secured with the Section 106 agreement, and it's the link between the site and the public right of way that will be secured by condition as currently proposed. So the upgrading works, just to be clear, is it comprises the public right of way within the site boundary itself.
Just to say, I think we have seen an informal email from the Public Rights of Way officer, which is kind of an email trail. We haven't had a formal response from the Public Rights of Way officer in terms of this application. And I think our view is upgrading the public right of way within the application site is proportionate to the proposal before us. And so I think we are, happy with what we are requiring is to mitigate the impacts of this development rather than perhaps a much wider upgrade, which we don't think is proportionate to the proposal before you. Thank you.
Any points the members want clarifying before I open the debate? No? Okay, open debate to councillors, members of the committee. Any comments to be made on this? Councillor Trollope, yes.
I'm just a bit concerned of debating this fully until we hear what the parish council has to say. I don't know if there's a way, if somebody could perhaps read her statement, or I know it's a bit inconvenient to defer, but I just feel it's a significant opinion, I think, to be heard.
Councillor Trollope, the Parish Council objections to this, or views on this application, are in the committee report. I'm not going to withhold because someone has late come into committee. Thank you.
Okay.
The member wishing to make a comment on this. Councillor Livingston, yes.
I note in the Billingshurst Parish Council objection, one of the points they've made is about a high density of dwellings, far in excess, which they would expect for a rural area such as Billingshurst, and for the, as stated within their neighbourhood plan. Why is it necessary to accept such a high density?
Sorry, Councillor Livingstone, could you repeat your point? I distracted the officer.
In the Parish Council objections, it talks about a high density of dwellings per hectare, of 30.45 dwellings per hectare, which is not in keeping with the rural design of Billingshurst, and does refer to other developments which only got 22.25 dwellings per hectare. Why is the higher level considered acceptable? So that's the only question I'm asking.
Thank you, Councillor Livingston.
Thank you. I have to say I haven't done the calculations on density on this one. There is the consented development to the east of the site and the development to the south of the site, which are reasonably high density. The outline application seeks for up to 102 dwellings. Whether that density could be delivered on site would be subject to the reserve matters, but it sets an upper limit. And as part of subsequent reserve matters, that would fall down to the layout and the open space within the site to define the sort of the ultimate housing mix and development quantum on the site. Noting also that we've got the commercial elements as well, so there'll be certain requirements to integrate or bear in mind the layout to make sure that houses are orientated in a certain way. So at this moment in time, we don't know what the ultimate mix or layout would be. We just know that 102 dwellings is the upper limit. The adjacent site was for 125 dwellings with open areas of space, and to the south it's reasonably high density as well. I don't know if I can go to the aerial. It doesn't really show it, unfortunately, on the aerial plan. But it's making most efficient use of space for a site within the built-up area boundary. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member wishing to comment? Councillor Croker, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a quick question for the officer regarding, I think, what's known as T3. I presume that T3 goes in order to get access to the public right of way, but I appreciate confirmation of that.
Yes, so T3, I don't know if I can show it here on this bit, if I try and find the cursor again. Unfortunately, I haven't got the tree protection plan in front of me. Let's try and find this one. Where's the cursor? There it is. So it is a tree around about there. And that would need to be removed to facilitate access into the southern parcel and the consented development at EVM. So we've got two tree groups, T1 and T2, and then one tree which will be removed to facilitate that access, and all the remaining trees are envisaged to be retained.
Okay, thank you for that. I've just got a couple of comments. I note in the officer's report at 6.54 that the preceding ecological mitigation strategy approved for the wider BTBP site sought to secure this hedgerow, that's the hedgerow along the northern boundary, being maintained at a height of 3 metres to provide an ecological feature, noting that the back corridor along New Road runs along New Road, and to secure visual screening. In the same paragraph, I also note that hedge is now being cut down to 1.2 metres, which raises questions about the future management of this site. And in that's interesting category, I think in 6.59, we're told that with regard to the trees that the officer's just been talking about, or the southern side of the site, and their root protection areas, under closer scrutiny, it appears that the line of the trees on plan has been moved so that it shows it as being clear of the development, rather than the development relocated clear of the root protection areas, given their original location on the plan. So an element of confusion there as to what is actually on the ground. How do we control it?
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that's something that we are aware of, and obviously we can secure that as part of the subsequent reserve matters details that would need to come out in so far as layout, and the tree position should be shown on that as well. The tree officer's concern was that the hard standing would be within the RPAs of those trees. But actually, as this is an outline application, we feel that the reserve matters can adequately address that and ensure that the details are shown and provide enough separation between the development and the trees. Thank you.
Councillor Croker, you wish to come back?
So that under reserve matters, we might expect the road to be moved a bit further north.
We are satisfied that the level of dwellings can be accommodated on the site with sufficient protection for the trees. What that actually looks like will be subject to the reserve matters application, but obviously we're not considering the indicative layout submitted, and we are confident an acceptable layout can be provided on the site. Thank you.
Any other member wishing to? Councillor Franklin, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Clark.
Thanks. Yes, I think it's just thinking to the future here, and this development being in place. I'm just interested to perhaps hear what protection residents might have from a redevelopment of the commercial area that could happen in 20 years' time, 30 years' time. Can you let us know what restrictions or constraints or conditions might be on future redevelopment of a commercial site that could have a significant impact on a residential area? I know it's not necessarily a factor for this decision, but I think it might be a point of interest for us in the round, if you like.
Thank you. So there's a certain amount that we obviously can't determine in the future. Are you, so just to be clear that I'm talking about the same thing, is it potential redevelopment of the purple blocks into residential, or is it protection of the residential development from those commercial units?
It was more, I mean, looking at the existing developed and operating commercial areas, the Shell, the Lidl and all the others, if in 20 years' time they were redeveloped into a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week distribution centre for Amazon, would that sort of redevelopment be harmful for residents? And if so, are there controls in place that we can that would avoid that eventuality?
Okay, thank you. Yes, so the existing trade park has hours of operation conditions on it, with the exception of the petrol drive-through, the filling station, and the Costa, so the coffee drive-through, which are 24 hours. If in future any re-proposals come forward, then obviously what may at that point be a residential development would then have to
Be a material consideration.
it would be a material consideration on the proposed development of the adjacent site at that time. So there would be an impact, just as we're considering the impact of the residential amenity on the existing, from the existing unit. So that would be a consideration at the later date. So yes, there would be considerations there.
Councillor Clark, and then I will come to you, Councillor Trott. I missed you putting your hand up. Apologies.
Thank you, Chairman. Coming back to the earlier discussion about the trees and etc. I mean, I note on page 24, paragraph 3.2 and 3.3 that the local consultees are very unhappy. But you said that a lot of the matters would be addressed at the next phase of the exercise. So are you satisfied that condition 12 covers this unhappiness from our, I can't say it, the tree guy.
Arboriculture.
Thank you. That one, plus the other things to do with the green bushes and trees in there. Are you satisfied that that condition will protect the site before we get to detailed matters?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. There are a number of controls in place, so I think we have to recognise the permission that was already granted to the south, and the loss of that T3 tree was already established at that time to get that access in there. We have got the condition, as you said, which provides further protections, and then the reserve matters would look at the fixed layout of the scheme and the impact on, we were talking about that eastern boundary there. So that would provide a mechanism, and obviously we would consult the arboricultural officer at that time and would be seeking sufficient distance away from those trees to protect it. If members felt strongly about that point, perhaps that's an informative we could add. Thank you.
So there's not going to be mission creep on taking out other trees?
No, that would be subject to the reserve matters, but I think our view is an acceptable layout can be secured to provide protection.
Councillor Trollope, yes.
Thank you. Looking at this application in a global sense, I applaud the amount of affordable homes, particularly of 3 and 4 bedrooms, which I think is good. When I first saw this application, and the reason why I brought it to council is I was concerned about the loss of employment, but I think it's okay. And I just wanted to confirm my understanding that yes, there is a small net loss of employment space, but the the land doesn't lend itself well because it's on a hill. And there is still some employment space being proposed, and also it's not related to this application, but there is the area south of Billingshurst, which has been cited for employment. So it's really, again, I know particularly in the parish council's objections, it's to do with the loss of office space, but I think have the officers kindly confirm my thinking that actually, yeah, it's not great, but it's quite mitigated, and we are getting some quality houses, I think, because of this.
Yes, so in short, it is a balance between providing additional housing, relocating some of that employment floor space onto a site that is slightly flatter. And yes, you're right, there are adjacent parcels of land, which I will just quickly refer to here. You can see the blue and the brown parcels adjacent to the southern field, where there is extant permission for employment floor space, albeit not directly connected to the application, but there is a provision for additional floor space nearby. And I think the site you're referring to, Councillor, is the Platts Meadow site. Is that the one?
Correct, yes. Yeah, I mean, I think in the end, what's important is we have employment space in Billingshurst. If it's not this application, so be it, as long as we have application space. Sorry, employment space in Billingshurst, that's what I meant to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Livingston, yes.
If we approve this application, we've got developers present in the room, can I ask them to consider the provision of accessible and adaptable homes in accordance with the building regulations part M, and perhaps we can supply an informative condition on this application?
We can't add a condition, Councillor Livingston, because it's not yet policy, but we could certainly add an informative.
Guidance, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll come back to the informative in a moment, Councillor. Any final points from any other member? No. Okay. Wording of the informative. How would you?
Yeah, I'm satisfied with what's going to be proposed. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to move to the vote. And the recommendation is to approve full and outline planning permission, subject to the conditions and completion of the necessary Section 106 agreement within 4 months of the decision of this committee, or such longer period as agreed by the Director of Place acting reasonably and properly, and including the informative that Councillor Livingston has just raised. All those in favour, please show.
That's unanimous.
Unanimous. Thank you very much. Therefore, the recommendation has been approved. Thank you. Moving on to item 6, which is DC 251910, land east of Billingshurst Business Park, Phase 2, Stane Street, Billingshurst. Could the officer please make a presentation to committee? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll keep this one slightly short. The application shares a lot of similarities as the previous one. Again, we have the late representations from both the applicant and the neighbouring landowner in relation to the public right-of-way. The content of that is not materially different to that which you were briefed on previously. The application site in this instance relates solely to the Phase 2 trade park. And is therefore within the built-up area boundary, and as previously, it's within the existing employment commitment. The proposal looks to provide up to 125 residential properties on that residual Phase 2 land. Here's a parameter plan showing the development area within the site and in context with the neighbouring development. And again, we have a height parameter plan which closely mirrors the earlier consented height limits across the site. We have an indicative master plan here showing the connection points to the public right-of-way. And as previously, we have the officer suggested condition that unimpeded public access be provided against the applicant's suggested condition that there be a access from the public right-of-way to the development site for residents only. So there's no fundamental difference there. So it's exactly the same conditions. The development would also provide a link along the south of the site, around the back of the Phase 1 buildings, with a view of bringing it into the existing cycle and pedestrian path at the south of Phase 1. You can see that on the orange line on the screen ahead. And just to show that connectivity there by way of the dotted line there. So, as set out in the report, officers are aware that the residual portion of the Phase 2 site, which benefits from extant permission for the development of up to 14,075 square metres of floor space, recognising that only 994 square metres has been delivered to date. The outline housing development would contribute significantly to the district's housing supply position, with up to 125 units proposed for this site. As the site lies within the defined built-up area, there is support in principle for the housing development on this site. And as previously, members will also note that the report refers to the applicants being in discussion to bring their site forward for 100% affordable. The Section 106 agreement has also been drafted to an advanced stage between parties and would therefore capture this flexibility alongside bus stop improvements and, as previously mentioned, the public rights-of-way improvement within the site. As with the preceding application, the proposal would result in the loss of all, in this instance, all remaining employment floor space potential within Phase 2, which is up to 13,081 square metres. However, officers also note that a third application is currently still at an early stage of consideration, and I'll refer to that one, to deliver outline consent for 4,558 square metres of employment floor space on land to the south of the application site, which sits between the blue and the brown outlines on the plan ahead. In the event of that permission being granted and delivered, it could, in combination with existing consented development, lead to the creation of some 9,000 square metres of employment floor space immediately adjacent to the existing trade park. As set out in detail in the report, officers consider that the redeployment of the residual Phase 2 site for housing would contribute towards district's housing need and takes into account the NPPF in relation to the reuse and reallocation of underutilised land for more effective use of sustainable sites, whilst continuing to deliver employment potential within the district, i.e. there is a site adjacent to the site which could come forward, albeit not under this current application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Invite the first speaker again on this item, and that's Alex Marshall. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, members. Again, your officers have recommended this application for approval. What's been very similar to the previous agenda item and providing the same benefits. It's an evolution of the proposal following feedback from the market. The officer has explained how the homes and employment are now split. This approach also enables independent delivery, helping accelerate both homes and employment space on a further application. Addressing some of the points raised by members around the ecology and the hedge cutting on the northern part of the boundary, that is actually subject of a police crime report, and we put an injunction on that northern boundary. We've got an interim injunction for a 1 metre standoff, so that was by parties unknown, and that's something that's still being investigated. It draws kind of neatly to the public right-of-way and the late representations of our neighbouring site, who are mandated to deliver a footpath alongside that hedgerow. And it's our understanding that their representations are pushing for these enhanced additional public right-of-way links onto our site, in an attempt to not or renege on delivering that footpath. That footpath is a safe and suitable access for all occupants and all kinds of people to use. Directing them onto our site, onto unlit, unsafe public right-of-way, is not a suitable solution. It also puts, again, undue burden on our site. There could be up to 400 occupants from the neighbouring site coming across our land, which is effectively getting a private right-of-way across a public forum, which we don't accept. We would ask members to discuss the contents of the letter that we put forward as a late representation. We do have copies of that if anyone would like to see that, and to consider the impacts that that's going to have on our site and the potential delivery of either this agenda item or the previous agenda item. However, our proposals, again, do have all the benefits of the previous ones. Our proposals have their own cycle routes, have their own pedestrian routes, which are lit.
Could you bring your comments to conclusion, please?
Direct access into Billingshurst Village Centre, and overall we would ask members to support the recommendation, but with the adapted condition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Invite Roger Welchman, please, and you have 3 minutes as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. This has many of the same positive features of the previous item, item 5. As you've heard, there's a separate application which is not yet ready to come to committee or be determined, but as recorded at paragraph 1.11 of the committee report, a complementary application for employment floor space on the phase 3 land is under consideration, and it's intended that this will be brought forward alongside the proposed housing. Just in respect of the late representations we've had from the adjoining owner, I'm feeling slightly uncomfortable that they've registered to speak as a supporter of our scheme, and accordingly we haven't really had a right of reply. But we have made our position absolutely clear in terms of our letter to the council, and I think it was your committee that actually refused their application with concerns about the points of access along New Road. This is not a factor which impinges on our site. We've got a developed site which offers sealed cycle pedestrian paths, high quality, which provide access to the bus infrastructure at Stane Street, and then there's already an established cycle and pedestrian route at the south west corner of phase 1. So this is not something that impinges, that makes there's prescribed standards for imposing planning conditions, and they must be necessary to make the application acceptable. And we make the case that it's neither necessary or reasonable in our case. We've written to highlight paragraph 96B of the MPPF, which emphasises the importance that places are safe, they're accessible, with well-designed, clear and legible pedestrian cycle routes. This is why we're advocating directing people through our site, through well-lit, sealed routes, accessible by all, not via a rural, unlit route, which raises problems, we say, in terms of good surveillance and secure by design principles. And that's why we're clearly advocating the condition that we have. This is not a factor that impinges on our client site. It's not a matter which, in planning terms, our client lads should be expected to rectify, as is plainly the case and confirmed through the extant permissions which relate to the application site. Acceptable access is established. The site is well connected, highly accessible, unimpeded access from the public right-of-way is therefore not needed to make this acceptable in planning terms. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Now invite Laura Ecott, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I'd first like to apologise because I did try to register as a neutral party, but that's not an option. So we're not objecting to the scheme. We're merely supporting on the condition that the planning conditions and Section 106 obligations are reviewed in relation to public right-of-way 1942. I shall not repeat my speech in full, as I've already said it tonight, but it was more the key points in relation to this application was a reminder that these upgrades for a 3-metre wide surface route have already been implemented and secured for the other sections of this route along the eastern boundary further south, and the planning conditions and Section 106 obligations have been secured for those adjacent developments. These proposed upgrades have been supported via email by West Sussex County Council's Public Rights of Way officer yesterday. And finally, these upgrades are considered necessary for the application to be deemed sustainable and provide suitable community benefit by delivering a coherent and integrated pedestrian and cycle corridor linking North East Billingshurst to the business park and the wider amenities there, thereby supporting sustainable travel throughout the village. Thank you once again for your time and consideration.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Faye Algar. Not arrived. Okay, I'll invite the officers to respond to the points raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just briefly, and I'm sure members recognise, but this site is effectively the same as the previous one in the sense of the residential area. The only exception, obviously, is the kind of southwest corner, which in the previous scheme was commercial. So this is largely the same. So obviously the material considerations are largely the same in terms of the decision that members have just raised. And obviously bearing in mind what the speakers have said, the condition recommended at condition 27 in the initial scheme is the same as that is recommended in this scheme at condition 23, which we feel is reasonable and necessary. Permeability between application sites is a fundamental basic of planning, and ultimately residents of those schemes can choose to take that route or an alternative route. So we are still advocating for the same wording. We're still in terms of the same level of upgrade to the public right of way within the site. So we're recommending the same, and that obviously is what members previously voted on in terms of those elements within that first scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any points of clarification from the comments made by? No? Okay, then we'll move on to the debate. Any points from members? No? Okay, then we'll go straight to the vote. Oh. Councillor Schrorup, just in time.
Sorry, thank you. If I'm not getting my applications modelled up, this site is going to be directly abutting the Littles and the forecourt and all that. And I remember there was a little bit of worry about the noise impact, and I just want to ensure that we have a sufficient condition in place for noise management and the impact on the residents who will be directly opposite.
Thank you. Yes, again, this is an outline application, so final layout will be subject to reserved matters. We're aware of the potential impact from those potential noise generating activities on the existing trade park. And there's also something called the agent of change, so we wouldn't want the residential properties to unduly impact on the operation of those existing commercial premises. So we have got a condition which has been recommended by our environmental health team. It's on both applications, and it just seeks some details of the acoustics to come forward as part of a condition. And I will just find that quickly for you. It is condition 5. A scheme of acoustic design and mitigation, including site-specific statement of design principles and accompanying noise mitigation zoning plan, shall be submitted with any reserved matters application. So we are aware of that, and we do feel that there's ways of being able to address and mitigate those concerns. Thank you.
Councillor Livingston, would you like to repeat your informative on this one as well? No, just would you want that informative included again?
That's my opinion, yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Any final points? No, therefore I will go to the vote. The recommendation is to approve outline planning permission subject to the conditions and completion of the necessary Section 106 agreement within 4 months of the decision of this committee, or such longer period as agreed by the Director of Place acting reasonably and properly, including the informative as previously noted by Councillor Livingstone. All those in favour, please show.
Unanimous.
Therefore, the recommendation has been approved. Thank you. This one. Okay, moving on to item number 7. Just wait for members of the public to leave.
Just need to swap laptops.
Swap laptops. Okay, item number 7 on the agenda is DC 251269, land north of Guildford Road, Bucks Green, Rudgwick. And please could the officer present the application to the committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. By way of an update, one further public representation has been received, which has not raised any new material planning considerations. It's also noted that since the publishing of the committee report, the applicant has provided revised access plans which clarify the layout of pedestrian footpaths along the site access. This has required change to the plans referenced within conditions 18 and 19, and I'll point out these changes when we reach that slide in my presentation. In addition, figure 1 within the committee report incorrectly showed the application site boundary, red line boundary, in relation to draft allocation HA14. This appeared to show the site boundary larger than it was. A correct plan is included within my slides, and I again will point this out during my presentation. So the proposal seeks outline planning permission for the erection of up to 90 dwellings, including 40% affordable provision, with all matters reserved apart from access. And the site is located on the land north of Guildford Road in Bucks Green. So this slide just shows you the site in relation to the built area boundary. and the conservation area. So again, this slide just shows you some of the key constraints in the area. The site falls north of Guildford Road and abuts the Brook Green built-up area boundary to the east. There are a number of listed buildings located in the vicinity, including the Fox Inn to the southwest, and there's a line of TPO trees to the south, which are located there. So they're the band of trees just outside the red line boundary. It's also noted that Rudwick Recreational Ground falls to the south and south of Guildford Road. So as existing, the site comprises of 2 undeveloped agricultural fields with a mature tree belt subdividing them as shown within these photos. So the right hand photo there shows you the tree belt. To the north, the site slopes upwards and continues towards onto more agricultural land into open countryside. And to the west, the site is bound by tree and hedge line and bordering Linwick Street. The south, the road fronts onto Guildford Road, and to the east is a mature tree belt and public footpath. There are a number of dwellings to the southeastern corner which are set back with their garden set back onto the site. So this slide shows the indicative site plan. Whilst detailed design and internal layout is reserved, this site plan indicatively shows the site comprising of detached, semi-detached and short rows of terraces and a small flat block within the central area. There's also an area of play and attenuation basins shown there in the central area. To the north of the site, there's a landscape buffer, which has been amended during the course of the application to increase its overall width and height. So this plan is one of the parameter plans that a reserve matters would need to broadly accord with, and it shows all the access points. So the vehicle access would be onto Guildford Road, and there are 4 additional pedestrian access points. These include a dedicated access and footpath, dedicated access to the south of the site towards the bus stop, and a pedestrian cycle access to the northwest onto Linwick Street, and then also 2 direct accesses onto the public right of way to the east. So this is the exact same slide, it just shows you the site plan overlaid so you can get context for where the site access falls. So this slide shows you technical drawings of the site access and the pedestrian crossing. Just to note here, where my cursor falls there, this section of footpath has been removed from the access plans. This was following consultation with the applicant Parish Council and West Sussex Highways. It was considered that as this bit of footpath doesn't actually lead anywhere, it would be better to remove it from the scheme and set the access further back. So those changes have been made, and they're the changes that are referred to in conditions 18 and 19 of the amendment at the start of my presentation. It's also noted here that given the nature of Guildford Road, the proposal includes a pedestrian, it would be a puffin crossing, so a signalled light crossing, accessing across Guildford Road into the recreational ground. Access to that could be gained either through the dedicated pedestrian path or through the site access shown there. So when the application was submitted, there were some initial concerns from landscape regarding impact from views to the north. In response to that, the applicant has amended the scheme to reduce the overall height of buildings to the north to 1.5 stories in an area of particularly prominence, with some increased 2.5 stories within the central area. It's also noted that the buffer has been increased, the landscape buffer to the north. So this section here shows you the 1.5 story dwellings to the northeast of the scheme and the site buffer, which would go a considerable way to reducing landscape impacts as shown from the north. So it is noted that the site boundary, the site is a draft allocation within the emerging local plan, HA14. However, the site boundary is larger than the allocation, and the quantum of development is greater than the allocation. For the interest of clarity, this is the correct site plan. So this differs ever so slightly from the committee report plan. So you'll see here that the red line boundary doesn't quite extend as far north. As set out within the officer's report, the development has been assessed on its own merits, and the proposal is considered to be sustainably located and of an appropriate scale in relation to Rudwick and Bucks Green, and would not result in unacceptable landscape impact, primarily as a result of the amendments to the landscape buffer to the north. So in summary, the site would provide 90 dwellings, or up to 90 dwellings, with 40% affordable. As set out in the officer's report, in light of the current housing land supply, a tilted balance with presumption in favour of sustainable development is engaged in this instance. The proposal is considered to be sustainably located and of appropriate scale in relation to Rudwick and Bucks Green, and would not result in unacceptable landscape impact. All other aspects of the proposal have been found acceptable, subject to appropriate planning conditions as set out within the officer's report. It's therefore recommended that planning permission is granted accordingly, subject to the conditions detailed below and the completion of a legal agreement pursuant to section 106. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Invite the first speaker on this application, that's Robert Bradley. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I speak today as a representative for the concerns of my community living on the A281 directly opposite the site. The road 90 homes will exit onto sees 10,000 vehicle movements a day. It's already unsafe based on years of evidence collected by Sussex Police, Community Speed Watch and speed indicator devices. 24/7 speed monitoring shows a daily 85th percentile of 44 miles an hour, which is 1,500 vehicles travelling faster than 44 miles an hour in a 30 mile an hour zone. But these averages hide the true danger. We see motorway acceptable speeds recorded daily. The highest speed recorded was 86 miles an hour. The proposed junction sits on a bend with just 90 metres of visibility. In good conditions at 30, the stopping distance is about 23 metres, but at 50 miles an hour, it increases to 53 metres, and at 86 miles an hour, it's well over 120 metres, which puts stopping beyond the entrance to the playing fields. There is a very real risk that the design does not provide safe entry or exit or pedestrian crossing with the current road safety measures, let alone with bad weather and regular, well-reported flooding issues at this location. In the event of a KSI at the location, it's highly likely that a coroner's inquiry will find it was a preventable death, which could have been mitigated by reasonable traffic management like those already seen on the A281 in Bramley and Shalford. The development more than doubles the number of homes in Bucks Green, which is more families, more turning vehicles, more children crossing the A281 to use the wicked facilities at the recreation grounds like Little Street, the Village Hall, the Youth Club and the team sports facilities, which is many more chances for tragedy. I volunteered with Speedwatch for years, persuaded 2 of our local MPs to come and join me roadside, as well as Sergeant Errol Barker from Sussex Police Force to witness these conditions firsthand. I've corresponded with the Chief Constable and the Office of Katie Bourne regarding road safety. We've campaigned for years, yet outside the occasional speed van enforcement, which still caught nearly 1,000 speeding vehicles in a 12-month period, there is effectively no consequence to the dangerous speeding situation. National planning policy requires development to create safe, healthy and sustainable communities. If this committee is to approve the application, then it must be on the condition of meaningful enforcement and traffic calming. This means Section 106 funding to ensure entry, exit and pedestrian crossing is safe, CIL funds for permanent average speed cameras, and measures that physically slow traffic and protect vulnerable road users. Failure to do so would mean that HDC breaches its own commitments in the council plan from 2023 to 27 to create safe spaces for children to grow and play and ensure villages are safer places for all. It also contradicts HDC's locally responsive service and ignores your listening and learning theme.
Could you bring your comments to conclusion, please?
The evidence shows that the HDC is already failing its responsibility for Bucks Green residents, both current and future, and failure to use this development as a catalyst for meaningful change will only reinforce the neglect. Please do not approve new homes without making our community safer. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I invite Paul Korniski. Apologies if I've mispronounced your name. You have. And you have 3 minutes.
Rudgwick Preservation Society maintains its objection. Bucks Green is recognised as one of 6 parish settlements in the Maid Rudgwick Neighbourhood Plan. Policy RMP 1.2 states that, quote, all development should be designed to avoid the diminution of a settlement's individual identity and actively respond to its built pattern. This application does neither. It increases the existing 60 homes in Bucks Green by up to 150%, and with an estate layout that does not reflect the existing linear pattern. Reference to the approximate 745 homes in Rudgwick's BUAB is not relevant. Bucks Green is not Rudgwick. Yes, jointly they are a medium village, but this is not relevant to settlement identity. The ignored Rudgwick Parish Design Statement, SPD, also recognises the one parish, 6 distinct settlements principle. The Society could respect the allocated site assessment in Policy HA 14. With no natural northern boundary and being on rising ground, it sensibly restricted development to the southern part and with a northern landscape buffer of some 40 metres average depth. This buffer was to be substantial and defensible, ultimately mitigating the severely impacted landscape views. The current proposals have reduced this buffer depth by 2/3 and also introduced an opening for an unjustified agricultural access. The fields to the north already have separate accesses from the north where the farm is based. In 2 places, the committee report incorrectly states that the northern boundary of the site aligns with the post and wire fence field boundary. The originally submitted 4.9 hectare Reg 18 site did have that boundary and promoted 105 homes. This application reduces that site size by exactly 10% to 4.41 hectares with 90 homes. It shifts the northern boundary south of the fence line, thereby creating a bizarre gap. The landscape master plan shows this clearly. This gap must only be used to achieve the landscape buffer as required by the original site allocation. This development will make the introduction of serious traffic calming measures on the A281 in Bucks Green an imperative. At Reg 18, Strutt and Parker, on behalf of Welbeck, submitted that there was, quote, potential for the site to contribute to any necessary traffic calming measures. Yet HDC failed to secure even the paltry £5,500 requested for such by Sussex Police. I implore the planners to make sure that this site is safe for existing and new residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Invite Edward Nice, please. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Chair, members of the committee, my name is Edward Nice and I've been a Bucks Green resident for 15 years. I recognise that your officer recommends approval for this scheme and that various consultees have not objected, but my objection to it factors in the cumulative impact of multiple issues. Bucks Green is a historic, rural ribbon development with properties, including many Grade 2 listed ones, sited along the A281. It is distinct from Rudgwick Village, both in geography and character. The proposed development site is open agricultural land, extremely important to its setting. A 90-home estate would more than double the size of Bucks Green, changing it from a rural settlement to a suburban extension. On flooding and drainage, the local lead flood authority raises no objection, subject to conditions, but their own comments identified unresolved issues. The drainage strategy is critically reliant on a 170-metre engineered sewer. Winter groundwater monitoring has not been completed. Any exceedance flows towards existing properties, quote, must be resolved. We already experience significant runoff from this field flowing into our gardens and onto the A281. The technical assessments do not reflect that lived reality. My own property has been very close to flooding and the A281 frequently floods, and the concern is that this development would compound those problems. There is insufficient infrastructure. West Sussex County Council Education states that Rudgwick Primary School is full in all year groups, and in fact April 2026 figures actually showed 215 pupils but a capacity of only 210. Their non-objection relies on the assumption that nearby schools will have space. That is not guaranteed capacity. NHS Sussex objects, stating that Rudgwick Medical Centre is, quote, at capacity, and that infrastructure levels are below recommended standards. Any financial contribution granted does not create a physical space or staff. West Sussex County Council Highways notes that this will be a car-dependent development. For a village with very limited public transport and little local employment base, this means hundreds of additional daily car movements on a stretch of the A281 already known for speeding, narrow footways, collision history, and the considerable road noise that the report identifies. Finally, the report gives little weight to cumulative impact from major developments in Cranley, Alfold, Dunsfold, and Broadbridge Heath, which already load the same roads and wider services. Taken together, these harms significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of a development of this size. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. To invite Paul Carnell, please. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Chair and members. My name is Paul Carnell and I'm planning agent for this application, speaking in support of the Officer recommendation to approve. Members will be more than aware of Horsham District Council's current and significant shortfall in 5-year housing land supply of just 1.7 years, and the most recent housing delivery test results, which are well below the required 75%. This engages the presumption in favour of sustainable development, where the NPPF directs decision makers to grant permission unless the adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. In this case, we consider there are a number of factors which weigh strongly in favour of the application, and these can be summarised as follows. Firstly, the site is identified as a draft allocation in the emerging local plan, and indeed it has been proposed for allocation throughout this plan process, demonstrating that the Council considers the site suitable and appropriate for new residential development. The application site area is slightly larger than the emerging allocation, but we have demonstrated through the course of this application that the implementation of an appropriate planting scheme, including a significantly enhanced northern buffer and the careful control of building heights and density towards the north of the site, can deliver a higher quantum of development compared to the proposed allocation with no wider adverse landscape impact. This enables the delivery of up to 90 new homes, including 40% affordable, which is more than required under current planning policy, and makes the most effective use of this sustainable site. Secondly, the Council's own shaping development in Horsham guidance explicitly supports the proposed development. The site directly adjoins the settlement, will meet her local housing need, and will not prejudice long-term development. The scale has been assessed by officers and found to be appropriate for a defined medium village. As noted, we have worked with officers to amend the scheme during determination so that no landscape harm would result. The proposal therefore accords with the Council's guidance on new development proposed in advance of the emerging plan. Thirdly, the proposal delivers sustainable public benefits, including up to the 90 new homes, contributing to addressing an acute housing shortfall, 40% affordable, exceeding policy requirements, investment in infrastructure, including highways improvements, such as the pedestrian crossing mentioned, sustainable transport measures, public rights-of-way upgrades, and measurable biodiversity gains. Importantly, there were no technical objections to the application. We've undertaken extensive public consultation and worked together with officers to make amendments to the scheme which address comments made as part of this process. In conclusion, when applying the tilted balance, the benefits, and particularly the delivery of housing and affordable homes in a district with a severe shortfall, must carry substantial weight in favour of approving the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would now like to invite Louis Wong, please. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. My name is Lewis Wong from Welbeck Land, the applicant for this planning application. I would like to build on Paul's comments by setting out the way in which this scheme has evolved during the determination process in response to officers' feedback and comments from the consultees to deliver a robust and policy-compliant proposal. We have worked closely with your officers to demonstrate that this has been achieved. The scheme has evolved to include a substantially increased northern landscape buffer from approximately 5 meters in depth to around 14 meters at its deepest point. Planting within this buffer would commence prior to construction, and over time, it is expected to mature into a meaningful structural planting belt. We have also reduced the building height along the northern boundary, moving from 2-storey to 1.5-storey dwellings to the northeast of the site. These amendments, alongside with a reduction in density in the northeastern part of the site, ensure that the development was sensitively integrated into the landscape over time. They directly address previously raised concerns from the landscape officer who now supports the approach. The layout is not fixed at this stage, but we have worked with officers to show a positively planned indicative scheme, which can be the blueprints for the development at the detailed design stage. Turning to highways and accessibility, we undertook several revisions to the scheme in response to comments from County Highways and the Parish Council. The introduction of a controlled puffing crossing responds directly to concerns raised by the Parish Council. This will provide a safe route for existing and future residents travelling to and from the south of Guildford Road. We have also included a potential link to Linwick Street to the northwest of the site, again responding to requests from the Parish Council to enable safer pedestrian and cycle access northwards towards Milk Churn and the Firebird Brewery. These enhancements include improved footways and multiple access points to the public right-of-way network. The changes demonstrate that this scheme is not only safe, but one which prioritizes connectivity and sustainable movement. In addition, the proposal has been refined in response to ecological, agricultural, and drainage matters. In conclusion, the proposal delivers a well-considered, landscape-led development shaped through collaboration and responsive design to securing the right development in the right place. For these reasons, and in the context of the tilted balance, we respectfully ask members to support the officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Invite Councillor Sue Korniski. You have 5 minutes. Thank you. You have 5 minutes as you are a parish councillor. Thank you. You could turn your microphone on, please. Thank you.
Rudwick Parish Council supports the site allocations in HDLP policy HA14. So what's wrong with this particular application? Well, it increases the site area intended for development, thereby causing more landscape harm, giving an inadequate landscape buffer to the north, further disrespecting the linear settlement pattern of Bucks Green, more than doubling the number of existing houses in Bucks Green. Also, it completely fails to tackle the A281 speeding issues. Thankfully, with support from the case officer, our active travel issues have been addressed, but others remain. In relation to landscape harm, the Reg 19 assessment set a smaller development site boundary, recognising the constraints of the unspoilt landscape and that the northern part of the site must provide a significant landscape buffer. So if the site boundary is to be greater than that sensibly allocated by HA14, it should be for good reason, e.g. to meet identified local housing need for bungalows, to provide Rudwick's only allotments, some were shown in the applicant's Reg 19 submission, to reposition homes further away from the A281 road noise and allow residents to access fresh air simply by opening windows. The environmental officer wrote, "This site is not in a city centre. Any need for mechanical ventilation should be designed out." A 4.9 HA site was initially proposed with 105 houses, subsequently reduced by 10% and with 90 homes. This still exceeded the HA14 allocation and also left an unused strip of land to the north. Bucks Green is one of 6 distinct settlements recognised by Rudwick Neighbourhood Plan Policy 1. Preserving its linear pattern is noted in the Reg 19 site assessment. RPC accepts that officers may now choose to give little weight to such conflict despite it worsening, but finds as incredulous the report conclusion that the settlement pattern is not breached. Rudwick's neighbourhood plan did not allocate sites. RPC attended parish workshops and wrote in support of the allocation of 2 sites, RD1 and RD2 in Bucks Green. This proposal relates to RD1, allocated for at least 60 homes, with adjoining RD2 for 6 homes. Currently, there are around 60 homes within the Bucks Green settlement boundary, So this was considered to just about comply with RNP Policy 1. The 750 homes in Rudgwick's separate settlement boundary are not relevant when considering the settlement identity requirement in RMP 1.2. The A281 in Bucks Green has over 10,000 vehicle movements per day. Speeding issues are a legitimate cause of concern, evidenced by data from the police, the Speedwatch team and the SIDS. This development will more than double the size of the settlement and will exacerbate Bucks Green's road safety issues. This will surely now require some permanent measures to calm traffic in order to meet the social objective of a safe place. Otherwise, it will fail MPPF sustainability requirements. RPC considers a 50% developer contribution towards any such site-specific measures justified and cannot understand why officers apparently consider that police infrastructure, e.g. speed cameras, cannot be secured under S106 if the R122 seal tests are met. The Parish Council welcomes the proposed modifications to conditions 18 and 19. We believe that condition 5 also requires change, as the landscape buffer is critical mitigation to the inevitable landscape harm. So it should specify a minimum depth of 25 metres by utilising land in the gap strangely left between the northern site boundary and the post and rail fence, if necessary via the S106 agreement. Insist on its integrity by removal of the unjustified agricultural field access, and require advanced planting as it will take years to become established. Finally, RPC respectfully requests consultation prior to the S106 wording being finalised in accordance with due process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I invite the officer to respond to points raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll begin on matters of highways in the A281. So just confirm the applicant has undertaken highways surveys, and the West Sussex County Council highways have been consulted on this application. So Guildford Road at present is a 30 mile an hour posted speed limit, and the applicant has undertaken speed surveys which demonstrate the eastbound 32.4 miles per hour in the 85th percentile and westbound 34 miles an hour. The applicant has additionally undertaken trick surveys which demonstrate the proposal would result in 79 two-way vehicle movements in the AM peak and 64 additional two-way movements in the PM peak. West Sussex have reviewed these details and they're satisfied that the increase in movements would be, I think that the word was indiscernible. Essentially, given the current volumes of traffic, the increase wouldn't be substantial. With regard to visibility displays and access onto Guildford Road, these have been calculated using the speed surveys as opposed to the posted speed. And West Sussex are happy that visibility displays can be achieved. There is a condition attached which would secure visibility displays. It is noted that the piece of vegetation that would need to be cut back in order to enable these. That condition ties that up. With regard to crossing points, the proposal has introduced a puffing crossing, which provides that safe sort of gold-plated crossing, really, to the south of the site and to the facilities and services within Rudgwick Rec. So that's a real benefit to be secured by the scheme, is that this additional crossing would be there. That was mainly put in due to the nature of Guildford Road, as it is a busy road, and it was considered by West Sussex that the existing pedestrian crossing was impractical in reality. It was around 300 metres further east, and would someone in reality walk 300 metres and then back again? So that's why that crossing has gone in there. With regard to speed cameras, and I'm aware there's been some comments regarding the £5,500 requested by Sussex Police. Officers have reviewed this. Initially, West Sussex Police, Sussex Police requested funding towards a speed camera. They later outlined that a speed camera wouldn't be practical on this stretch of road, primarily due to where it would need to be sited in order to have power and connectivity. That bit of road is curved, and the radar wouldn't work, according to Sussex Police. They revised their request to £5,500 for towards a parking area for a speed monitoring van. It's just to note, speeding is an existing issue along the road. SIL for emergency, SIL is used to meet emergency services. We can only request contributions via section 106 if they are specifically required in order to address any needs of the development. In this case, those tests would not be met. So we're not in a position where we can insist on those fundings. Irregardless of that, it noted in the committee report that the siting of the speed van would be in an area of mature tree line. It's not feasible that could be delivered in practice in any event. So whilst of course I'm conscious of the public's concern of speeding, every effort's been made here to provide safe crossing across the road for future residents, and the access has been assessed on the basis of current speed and current characteristics of that road, and has been found acceptable. So highways sets quite a high bar for substantial impacts, and that hasn't been met here. The scheme has been found acceptable, and no objection has been raised by West Sussex. With regard to the quantum of development and the difference between the site and the draft allocation, so just note that the draft allocation is supported by emerging local plan evidence base, and this serves to show the location as a sustainable location for development in principle, and that evidence base it's been taken into consideration. However, the application has been assessed on its own merits as set out in the officer report. So the two key areas that the report focuses on is the quantum of development and the landscape impact from this increased quantum versus what was envisaged at draft allocation stage. The report has found that there wouldn't be any unacceptable impacts sufficient to warrant reason for refusal, and in this instance, irregardless of the allocation, the site location that it talked about would be found acceptable and sustainable, and that is in relation to Budwick and Bucks Green, which are grouped together as a tier 3 settlement. So whilst I acknowledge the separate settlements of Bucks Green and Rudwick, in terms of sustainability and access to facilities, they group together for HBF policy, and that's the basis on which the application has been assessed. With regard to the buffer to the north, the landscape buffer and potential landscape impacts, as noted in my presentation and the committee report, there was some initial concern there regarding the impact to the north, and that was raised by our landscape officer. In response to that, the buffer has been substantially increased. We have a condition in place to secure planting prior to commencement, so that would ensure that planting starts to take root essentially and can progress as quickly as possible before development takes place. That is on there as a condition, and the landscape officer is satisfied that there's no objection there. They're satisfied with the approach, and that the proposal and the quantum development there wouldn't result in an unacceptable landscape impact. Just making sure I pick up any remaining points regarding flooding and drainage. So at this stage, this is of course outline application. So we've got outline details and an outline plan. The drainage scheme relies on, I believe, two, if we can jump to the plan, three surface level drainage basins, and then there are a number of subterranean crates as well, and they would ultimately drain into a sewer, a new sewer, which would go directly into an existing surface water drainage ditch. So none of it would go into the sewer network. That sewer would be built in accordance to sewer standards under the highway. And if you can see my cursor, the drainage ditch comes out somewhere over here. It is absolutely noted that West Sussex Lead Local Authority, who have reviewed the application, have highlighted a couple of points where they wanted reassurance. So there were, initially there was some concern regarding that sewer and who was going to maintain it. The applicant has since confirmed that it would be built to the standards of a publicly adopted sewer. It would be taken over by the water network from that point onwards. That resolved those concerns. Also noted that exceedance flows towards existing dwellings. The officer expressly said that this does need addressing. However, they also expressly said that that can be done at reserved matter stage. There are a number of conditions within the application for those to be addressed. And then in regard to education and school places, apologies, I need to flick to the correct place in my report. So we have a no objection from West Sussex Education. They were satisfied. So bear with me. So they were satisfied that on the basis of 1.9 pupils for primary education, that there would be would like to be capacity within the local school for all residents, all children of residents. However, they note that there's also would be remaining capacity in neighbouring primaries within the Billinghurst locality, and that numbers are forecast to fall generally within school places. They've also confirmed in a later comment that there would be sufficient secondary capacity for all residents of the development. So there's no objection there. With regard to the NHS service and doctors, again, as with Sussex Police, those services are met by SIL contributions, which are intended to meet infrastructure needs. There's no basis on which we could request additional contributions towards that. That should be sought out of SIL. The applicant did also note that the doctor's surgery was still taking new patients at this time. But I think that wraps up most outstanding points. So, yes, I think that addresses everything. If there's anything remaining, please come back to me. Regarding environmental health. So, yes, the environmental health officer noted that there would be some noise from Guildford Road towards the southwest of the site, and that wouldn't accord with British standards within the current scheme. They noted that in the worst case scenario, to the bottom of the hierarchy, that could be dealt with via mechanical ventilation. However, this is an outline scheme. The layout isn't formalised, so the applicant would be encouraged to remove dwellings out of those zones. Those surveys have been done. They're aware of where that noise would be, and the site plan could reasonably be adjusted to ensure that is the case. If there's anything else, please come back to me.
Thank you. Any members want anything clarified on those points raised? Councillor Mercer, yes.
On the highways matters in particular, I recognise that there's a condition and it's a reserved matter in terms of the visibility displays. My parents' house is in Surrey in Wannish, and I have friends in Loxwood, so I know this junction really well. And I'm really concerned about it. This is the first time, I must admit, I've seen where the proposed access to the development is. And it makes that combination of the 281, the Loxwood Road, and the access really tricky for drivers. Coming out of the Loxwood Road going eastwards, you're basically, if you're driving a geared car, you're hanging on your clutch, trying to make sure that you see people coming too fast from your right, and also too fast from your left. And now you've got the complication of an access road just immediately after your turn. Can I just ask the officers, do you know if the Highways Authority considered a roundabout at this point? Because it seems to me it would both make that safer and also deal with some of the speed issues.
So I don't expressly know if a roundabout was considered. From working with West Sussex County Council officer, they did note that the pedestrian crossing would act as a speed calming measure, which would go some way to alleviating the concerns. But no, I'm not aware that roundabout was expressly considered. I think they've just assessed the access as proposed.
Open debate. Any members wish to raise any points? Comment? Thank you. Councillor Clark. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. A series of questions. The initial allocation and the proposed allocation, do we know what actually set the limits on those allocations? Was it a natural feature or an artificial feature? And why is what's being proposed bigger than what we had put into our plan? So that's the first question.
Thank you. So I'll just go back to the...
It's the orange and red drawing that you put up.
Yes. So I'll start here, if that's okay. So as you can see, there's no physical mark or at least historic mark within the site to mark that. So it is, to an extent has been led purely by the envisaged landscape impact, which is why that is a clause within the draft policy. So find the right one. There we go. So I believe that line was set with the intention of mitigating any future landscape impact, which is why the report has focused so heavily on trying to assess whether there will be an outstanding impact from that push further north. It concludes that with that buffer in place, there wouldn't be, and the officers raised no objection to that.
Looking at the housing mix and affordable housing, I realise that this is an indicative mix, but I noticed there's an oversupply on the small properties in the proposed mix. And just flag in that we have said a number of times, inclusive of for this one, that in fact we need bigger properties. And I note the emphasis on single bedroom properties, so there's an overproduction, if I could put it that way. And yet, unfortunately, we lose the bigger properties, which are like hen's teeth. Can anything be done about that, or can that be addressed at the detail stage? Because it's not giving us what we want.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I believe the report should state that this isn't what we'd expect to see. So there is currently an oversupply of smaller dwellings and an undersupply of larger ones, particularly within affordable. Any final housing mix, along with any housing numbers, because at the moment it's up to 90, it could be 89, it could be 88. Any final housing mix would be at reserve matters. At that stage, we would expect to see policy compliance for HBF 16, which requires accordance with the strategic housing market assessment, which is, it's laid out there. Actually, it's in the report there for you. So it tells you what we'd expect to see, and that's what we'd need to see at reserve matters for it to be acceptable.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the officers for a very good presentation and a very full report, for coming back on those concerns expressed by residents and the parish council. Am I right in thinking that this puff-in crossing is sort of like an automatic crossing, and that it senses anybody approaching and therefore turns red if there's somebody actually standing there? You don't have to press a button, it's automatic, if I've understood that correctly. I welcome that. It is a really busy road, I know it well. I too have some concerns about the access, but as you've said, highways don't raise any objections or concerns, so we'd have a problem refusing it on those grounds. The site allocation in the emerging local plan was for around 60, and this is 90, so it's 50% increase, but the actual land take isn't hugely different. And I welcome the buffer, the enhanced buffer at the northern side. Did you say 1.5 storey homes at that northern boundary, which obviously has less of an impact than it would be if it was 2 storey? And my other concern was about the flooding, but I think you've covered that, although that part of the road does flood quite significantly from time to time in heavy rain. So can you just clarify those points, please?
Absolutely. So to begin with the puff-in crossing, my understanding is it would be a button. So you would press the button and the green man changes. There was a discussion early on with when it comes to reserve matters, because to put that crossing in place, they had to discuss whether it could physically fit with the next crossing, because they had to link the lights. So as far as I'm aware, it's a button, and you press the button and you can cross. but yeah, that gives you the controlled crossing and it stops traffic for you. With the 1.5 stories, yes, that's correct. So that plan there shows you this area here, which is a slightly lighter colour, would be the 1.5 story zone. That's area particularly because that is an area of higher landscape prominence, and that elevation there cuts through and shows you the landscape buffer and those dwellings. So it just shows you that over longer views you wouldn't get these ridge lines proceeding up above. With flooding, yes, there's some existing surface water flooding that is modelled, and it falls within the A models, so it falls along the road there. This application should ensure that surface water is addressed there.
Chairman, thank you for letting me come back. Thank you for that clarification. The speed camera issue, the police are now saying they couldn't support a fixed camera, but could they support a portable one from time to time? Is that, it's in the report somewhere, I'm sure.
So my understanding is that they currently operate mobile speed cameras in the area. That's something that already takes place, irrespective of this application. The request for funding was indicated to be spent on a parking area for a mobile speed van.
That's right.
However, as I've said, it's not something that we could secure within a Section 106, and it's not clear that it could be delivered on the site. That would be irregardless of a speed camera or a parking area. That's just still regulations, I'm afraid.
It can't be required because it's an existing issue, not exacerbated by this proposal.
In essence, yeah. If we had a scenario where to achieve acceptable speed for visibility, you'd need to provide speed reduction, or it's something that perhaps could be discussed, but it'd be very case by case. And in general, emergency service provision comes from SIL. That's what SIL's there for.
Just to say, obviously, this scheme will generate SIL, which, you know, part of it will be paid to the district and part to the parish. So, you know, there will be opportunities to apply for that money. And I think Horsham Town have secured some SIL money for that recently. So it's certainly possible through that route. Thank you.
Councillor Trollope.
Thank you. Can you just maybe shed a little bit of light on how these speed surveys are carried out? I'm just worried that perhaps there's a potential that the results might not be wholly accurate if, for example, the car drivers or the vehicle drivers saw the cameras and therefore slow down. I don't know if there's an observer's effect that is measurable or not. I know from my own experience cycling on that road, even in this area, cars are going very fast, and I'm surprised at the assertion that the speed limits are recorded, you know, under 35 miles an hour, just based on my own personal experience of cycling.
Thank you. I'm not a technical highway expert, but generally, you know, speed surveys are carried out as per an industry standard methodology. When they submit their speed surveys, obviously the county highway engineer assesses the methodology and the results to ensure it meets those standards before they comment on it. So that's part of their process. So, you know, if there were concerns, and sometimes they do raise concerns, they would have done so as part of the application process. So I think from the fact that we have no objections from county, and obviously that, you know, we have to accept that they've scrutinised that methodology and it is therefore acceptable. Thank you.
Question for the officer. Did you mention the 85th percentile that speeds were taken in both directions? You did, didn't you?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Well, to do that, I suspect, and I'm not going to use the right terminology, so forgive me, they actually put strips across the road, and that allows them to measure the speed in both directions and number of vehicles, and they can then calculate what the speed is in the 85th percentile.
Thank you for that. Okay.
Any other? Okay. Councillor Livingston, yes.
I know there's a provision of houses 2.5 stories. I don't recognise the terms 2.5 stories from the times I've been working in the building industry. This is a free story. Any occupier would realise it is a free story. So therefore, they're unlikely to be suitable for long-term, lifelong habitable areas for elderly people and disabled. But can I once again request that an informative is included with this application to development if we approve this proposal? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any final comments before I go to the vote? Okay, I will go to the vote, and the recommendation is to approve outline planning permission subject to the conditions and completion of the necessary Section 106 agreement within 4 months of the decision of this committee or such longer period as agreed by the Director of Place, acting reasonably and properly and including the informative raised by Councillor Livingstone. All those in favour, please show.
That's 12-4.
Any against? Any against? No? Any abstentions?
1 abstention.
Okay. Therefore, the recommendation has been approved. Thank you. Members, would you like a break now, or can you? Okay. Well, we'll take a 15-minute. No, I'm going to say 10 minutes because you'll take 15. So if I say 10-minute break. Thank you. Moving on to item number 8 on the agenda, which is DC 251700, the Slips, West End Lane, Henfield. Please could the officer make the application to committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. This application seeks permission for the change of use of the land for the stationing of 4 gypsy and traveller static caravans for residential purposes and 4 associated day rooms. Hopefully you can read that slide. This is just the one verbal update in that West Sussex Fire and Rescue have requested the following condition be added. I'll just leave that up for you to read. Okay. The site is shown on the location plan on this slide. It is located approximately 216 metres to the west of the built-up area of Henfield on West End Lane. The surrounding area is rural, with dwellings dispersed to the southeast along Lawyers Lane and further west along West End Lane. These dwellings lie some 66 metres further west. The field itself is largely enclosed with mature boundary hedgerows, together with a group of mature oak trees protected by a tree preservation order, reference TPO 1537, along the western and eastern boundaries. And these are shown in green, light green, on the aerial map as shown there. Here are some photos of the site. Photos 1 to 3 are taken from the site entrance, looking towards the south, east, eastern and western boundaries. The trees that form part of the group TPO can clearly be seen on these photos. Photos 4 and 5 again are taken from the entrance point and show the eastern and western directions along West End Lane from the site entrance. The proposal shows the site plan of the proposed scheme, which is for 4 pitches, with each comprising space for a static caravan, private garden area, parking and permeable hard standing. Each pitch would have a day room, the elevations and plans of which are shown on the right-hand side of the slide. In terms of consultations, the Council's tree officer expressed initial concerns with the scheme, and following amendments to the design, they concluded no objections subject to conditions relating to compliance with the submitted arboricultural impact assessment and method statement. This has been covered by conditions 7 and 13 of the report. The Council's drainage officer initially requested details of existing and proposed greenfield runoff rates to ensure that the site could be serviced in principle in order to comply with policy 23C and 38 of the framework. The additional information was provided and approved by the Council Drainage Officer. The outstanding details that are technical in nature can be secured by condition 3, and these include the final calculations, attenuation volumes and management arrangements, and these are typically secured through condition. This is a standard practice for developments of this nature, where a compliant drainage strategy has been demonstrated in principle. Landscape, ecology, including great crested newts, highways and environmental health have all been consulted, and no technical objections have been received that would warrant a refusal. I'm just going to pull up the Gypsy and Traveller approvals. Hopefully you can read those. The most recent Gypsy and Traveller accommodation assessment from 2023, together with its 2024 update, identifies a requirement for 61 pitches within the first 5 years of the emerging local plan period, 2023 to 2028. At the time of writing the report, only 32 deliverable pitches could be identified, resulting in a shortfall of 29 pitches. Since the report was written, a further 2 pitches were approved at Hilly Barn, resulting in 34 pitches deliverable and a shortfall of 27 pitches. These approvals are shown on the G&T slide that I'm just showing there. Of those, 3 approvals are shown within Henfield. And I'll just pull up the map, which identifies, so you can see on the left there, Stone Pit Lane, which was the approval for 3 pitches. That's approximately 200, just under 200 metres to the north. And then further to the far right-hand side, Pear Tree Farm, there are 2 approvals there for 3 pitches and 5 pitches. Further south, not indicated on this map because it is 2.5 kilometres away, there is an additional site for 2 pitches just on Shoreham Road in Small Dole. So given the lack of technical objections, the assessment against local and national policy and the current shortfall, the officer recommendation is for approval subject to the conditions attached in the officer report. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Invite the first speaker, and that's Celia Price. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. This objection identifies 6 key points. First, policy 1 of the adopted Henfield neighbourhood plan does not support development outside the built-up area boundary. Setting aside the neighbourhood plan is directly against the government's directive of travel for local government reform, which places greater weight on local communities shaping local decisions. Weakening the neighbourhood plan completely undermines that principle, not to mention the democratic process. Our Member of Parliament has also publicly supported the community's efforts to protect Henfield from further unplanned development, including through the recent Henfield Action Day, which highlighted the cumulative pressure the village is already facing. Second, the nature of West End Lane makes this location fundamentally unsuitable. It's a single-track rural lane, and in many stretches, 2 vehicles simply cannot pass. There are no footways or lighting. The recent planning inspector's decision on the burial ground appeal just a few hundred metres away found that West End Lane is car dependent and that increased vehicle movements would harm the rural character of the lane. If a quiet, low-impact burial ground was unacceptable here, then a permanent residential caravan site must surely be more inappropriate. Third, the ecological position. A badger set has been identified on site, and under the Protection of Badgers Act 1992, disturbing or obstructing a set is a criminal offence. Yet the appraisal relies on precautionary method statements rather than a full ecological impact assessment. Given the proximity of the construction, lighting and noise, it's not even clear that the set has been properly assessed or safeguarded. Fourth, the proposal conflicts with HDPF policies 25, 26 and 33 by introducing an urbanising form of development into open countryside. The officer report acknowledges moderate landscape harm, but the inspector's recent decision confirms that even localised harm is still harm, and that countryside protection policies remain up to date and carry significant weight. Fifth, this is a speculative application. Other gypsy and traveller sites elsewhere in the district are or have been considered through the local plan process. That is the correct plan-led route. Approving an unallocated site now would undermine that process and create a precedent for bypassing proper site selection, assessment and community consultation. Finally, cumulative impact matters. National policy requires that traveller sites do not dominate the nearest settled community. Here, the cumulative effect is real and cannot be ignored. The Henfield neighbourhood plan should be upheld. Democracy should be respected, and the rural character of West End Lane must be protected. The recent burial ground appeal shows clearly that this location is not suitable for development of any kind.
Could you
and
bring
for
your
these
comments
reasons,
to
I
conclusion,
respectfully ask
please?
you to refuse this application.
Thank you. Invite Michael Cox, please. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Evening Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michael Cox. I'm a retired planning consultant with many years experience in gypsy and traveller site provision. On this occasion, I'm speaking to you against the application and against the recommendation in your report. I propose to focus primarily upon planning policies at both national and local level, which must be considered in the context of this application. National Planning Policy Framework is a material consideration of significant weight in the determination of this application. It must be read as a whole and in conjunction with the government's planning policy for traveller sites. At the core of the NPPF is a presumption in favour of sustainable development. Now, sustainable development is pursued by the decision-taking means of firstly approving development proposals that accord with an up-to-date development plan, or where there are no relevant development plan policies or the policies which are most important for determining the application are out of date, granting planning permission, unless there are two caveats which are both important and cannot be ignored or marginalised. The first of these is the application of policies in the framework that protect areas or assets of particular importance provides a strong reason for refusing the development proposed. And secondly, any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies of the framework taken as a whole. Policies in the framework that protect areas of particular importance are twofold. One, conserving and enhancing the natural environment, where the policies state they're protecting and enhancing valued landscapes and recognising the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside, both of which this particular proposal fails to address. It is a proposal for the incursion of built development into what your officers have described as a rural area, which is essentially open in character and visually part of a much more attractive, wider landscape. The second caveat relates to habitats and biodiversity, and this is particularly relevant.
Could you bring your comments to conclusion, please? Thank you.
This is particularly relevant in respect of the trees on the site, which are of significance. It is development resulting in the loss or deterioration of irreplaceable habitats, such as ancient woodlands and ancient or veteran trees, should be refused unless there are wholly exceptional circumstances and a suitable compensation strategy exists. There are no such circumstances to mitigate against this requirement.
Thank you. Sorry, I have to
and therefore
conclude
permission should be refused. Thank you.
Invite Thomas Holman, please. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tom Holman, and I've lived in West End Lane since 1987. I'm objecting to this application for the following reasons. Firstly, Henfield is already accommodating more than its fair share of traveller provision. Existing permanent pitches here already account for over 10% of the Horsham district requirement, despite Henfield representing only 4% of the district's land area. There is a site less than 200 metres away in Stone Pit Lane, another application pending there as well, and further sites in Furness Lane and on Shoreham Road. The cumulative impact is significant. Quite simply, enough is enough. Secondly, this site was not identified for development in the Henfield Neighbourhood Plan, which was adopted as recently as May 2021, following a community vote. That plan reflects careful, democratic, local input. If developments like this are approved outside of it, it raises a fundamental question of what weight is being given to the neighbourhood plan. Thirdly, infrastructure is wholly inadequate. No footpaths, no public transport, There is no mains drainage in West End Lane. This raises serious concerns about reliance on cesspits, the risk of ditch pollution, and increased heavy tanker movements along what is a narrow rural lane. There is also no mains gas. These are not minor issues, they go directly to the sustainability and suitability of the site. Fourthly, the proposal would urbanise a quiet countryside lane. Caravans, associated structures, lighting, vehicles, deliveries and visitor traffic would fundamentally change the rural area character of the area. The impact would be comparable to introducing several new dwellings outside the built-up area boundary, contrary to established planning principles. Finally, there is a clear and very recent planning precedent nearby. The appeal decision for Spring Acres, DC 240062, on West End Lane is highly relevant. The planning inspector concluded that development in this location failed to meet countryside policy criteria under the Horsham District Planning Framework, particularly in terms of sustainability and accessibility. Those same constraints apply equally here: a countryside site, poor access and reliance on private vehicles. This proposal conflicts with local and district planning policy, places further strain on unsuitable infrastructure and adds to an already disproportionate concentration of sites in Henfield. With over 70 objections and none in support, I respectfully ask councillors to give full weight to community concerns and refuse this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Would now like to invite Ben Kirk, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of this application. The proposal has not come forward lightly or without careful consideration. It's the result of a lengthy and constructive process of engagement with officers, where the applicant has worked closely with the council to shape a scheme that's both policy compliant and sensitive to its surroundings. Members may be aware that an earlier application for 5 pitches was withdrawn. Following detailed discussions with officers and technical consultees, the scheme has been reduced to 4 pitches. This reduction is significant. It directly responds to concerns raised, particularly in relation to the layout, impact on trees, and the overall intensity of the development. In addition, the applicant has made a substantial and financial and professional investment to ensure that this proposal is robust and policy compliant. A full suite of specialist reports has been prepared, including detailed drainage strategies, ecological assessments and arboricultural reports. These are not superficial documents. They demonstrate clearly that the site can be developed without unacceptable impacts. Indeed, consultees, including highways, ecology, environmental health officers, have all raised no objection subject to conditions. This is exactly how the planning system is intended to work. Identify the issues, address them properly and evolve the scheme into an acceptable form. That's what's happened here. Turning to the planning balance, there is a critically important point that members must give significant weight to. The council is currently unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of gypsy traveller sites. That's not a minor policy gap, it is a substantial shortfall. The evidence shows there remains a clear and pressing unmet need across the district. In these circumstances, national policy is very clear. The presumption in favour of sustainable development applies, and permission should be granted unless the adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Here, the benefits are clear and substantial. This proposal will deliver 4 much-needed pitches, contributing meaningfully to addressing the unmet need. It will provide stable, lawful accommodation for gypsy and traveller families, supporting inclusive communities and meeting identified housing requirements. Against that, the identified impacts, principally limited and localised landscape change, have been carefully assessed by officers and found to be moderate and capable of mitigation. Importantly, officers conclude that these impacts do not outweigh the benefits. This is not an untested or speculative scheme. It is a refined, policy-led proposal that has evolved through engagement, supported by technical evidence and recommended for approval by your officers. In summary, the applicant has listened, adapted and delivered a scheme that responds directly to concerns. The need is clear, the policy context is supportive and the impacts are acceptable. For those reasons, I respectfully ask members to support the officer's recommendation to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Now invite the ward councillor, Councillor Jill Perry. You have 5 minutes, Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. I'm Jill Perry, District Councillor for Henfield and Henfield Parish Councillor. I had hoped not to repeat the important points already made by local residents, but find that I will be doing so, and probably with good reasons. And I ask the committee to note their concerns and fully consider their views in making this planning application. I will, however, also be voicing the views of Henfield Parish Council as well as my own. The Slips is even further down a narrow country lane from the recently considered Sandgate nursery site. There is no pavement and little street lighting. The local bus service is negligible. The Slips cannot be considered a site where any development would improve local transport options. Of course, different standards on sustainable transport apply due to the type of application, but we should be honest that this development will increase motor traffic on West End Lane. Also, that any buildings to be constructed would contribute to urbanising the country lane with no pavement, much used by walkers and joggers. The site was a sheep field over the last few years before it became a temporary campsite. It is important open country landscape outside the built-up area boundary and proposed development, and the proposed development will certainly blur the edges between the built residential area of Henfield and the important wildlife corridor leading to the River Adur. It's therefore in conflict with the neighbourhood plan, as others have said, and affects confidence in neighbourhood planning across the entire district. Henfield Parish Council believes that while the number of pitches in Horsham as a whole may not yet meet the target, a local need in close proximity to Henfield would be harder to demonstrate. Some of the recently approved sites for local gypsy and travellers have not yet been built on or are operating. The parish believes that the 9 pitches that have been approved in our parish over the last 4 years are already there, and that maybe that is where it should be stopping for the moment. Of course, they accept there is a justified need for more pitches in the district, but has concerns of over-concentration in certain locations, especially when we cannot be sure that these are located in the most in-demand locations. The Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government Planning Policy for Traveller Sites, updated in 2024, summarises its advice as the government expectation is that these pitches should be in broad geography, a number of locations to facilitate the traditional nomadic way of life. We need an ongoing indication of how close Horsham District Council is as a whole from meeting its 5 and 15-year rolling targets, so that as we approach those targets, we can make informed and balanced decisions on the best and most acceptable sites for such developments in future. Otherwise, we risk making decisions in a vacuum, and this may even lead to oversupply in some areas or timeframes. I'm concerned that the further information on drainage, which was requested by HDC, and according to recent information has been supplied by private email correspondence, is not fully aware for us. Having attended a recent presentation on managing the important River Adur catchment area from the Ouse and Aders River Trust expert, Pete King, I'm aware that Henfield has an unenviable data record in respect of sewage outflows from the Hollands Lane site and other considerations going into the Adur catchment. It's clear that the local infrastructure is not coping. The Ouse and Adur River Trust data suggests worsening conditions in the future due to increased expected tidal flooding on the Adur for longer periods in future, and similar groundwater issues related to climate change made me even more concerned that the full drainage report for this application is not yet available. Councillors are being asked to approve pre-commencement condition 3 on this issue. If this application is approved, despite what you've heard from residents, I hope officers can reassure local councillors and residents on the complete adequacy of the improved or conditioned drainage and sewage plans. Conserving the natural environment, in this case the wildlife corridor to the Ada, is a key concern to protect everyone's future, biodiversity and food security. Should this application be successful, I welcome the replacement of the laurel hedging along the native hedgerows, but ask that consideration is given to staging the removal of the laurel hedge, which effectively screens the site while building works are ongoing. Similarly, the flexibility shown to protect the TPO trees on site by redesigning the plan is welcomed, as is the permeable
Could
hard
you
stand-
bring your comments to conclusion,
I
please?
will.
Thank you.
As is the permeable hard standing. Residents living in this area have told me that this site has had an interesting history, and should this speculative application be approved, as officers recommend, it would be good to think that its future residents might work with the community to develop a positive neighbourhood along this country lane. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Invite the officers to come back on the point. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just make a quick comment and then I'll pass to my colleague for the technical matters. I just wanted to clarify the relationship with the neighbourhood plan. There is no conflict with the principles of the neighbourhood plan here. This is because essentially neighbourhood plans are silent on gypsy and traveller sites. Neighbourhood plans cannot conflict policies within the Horsham District Planning Framework. And the key consideration is therefore policy 23, which sets out a criteria-based approach to the acceptability of gypsy and traveller sites, which amongst others says it needs to be in or near to existing settlements. So there's no requirement to be within a built-up area boundary. So I just want to make that clear. And then the other quick point is, obviously, we're not considering what's the best sites. You know, we are considering, is this site acceptable in accordance with policy? And I'll pass to my...
Thank you. I'll just pick up from where Emma left off. So in terms of the comments regarding accessibility and sustainability, the Highway Authority has confirmed that walking and cycling are feasible and that cycle parking is provided, although it is acknowledged that West End Lane lacks continuous footways and street lighting, which may encourage reliance on the private car. However, the Highway's no objection relates to highway safety and capacity only, confirming that development would not result in an unacceptable or severe impact on the network. It is not relied upon as evidence of sustainability in broader planning terms. And in applying policy 23D, regard is had to national policy which recognises that gypsy and traveller sites are often located in rural or edge of settlement locations and are not expected to achieve the same level of accessibility as conventional housing. In this context, the site is not considered to be isolated and maintains a reasonable functional relationship with Enfield. In terms of the comments on ecology and concerning badgers, the application is supported by sufficient ecological information, which includes a badger activity survey, and the council's appointed ecologist has confirmed that subject to conditions and or licensing requirements, impacts on protected species can be appropriately mitigated. In terms of the comments on landscape, countryside and trees, so in this case, the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable gypsy and traveller pitches. As a result, the relevant policies restricting the supply of such sites are considered out of date and the presumption in favour of sustainable development is engaged. So the acceptability of the site is therefore based on a combination of factors, including its proximity to Henfield, its limited scale, the absence of technical objections, particularly in landscape and character terms, which are assessed as moderate and capable of mitigation. It's not considered to represent isolated or sporadic development in a remote location, but rather a small-scale site with a functional relationship to an existing settlement. In terms of trees, I think it's noted in the report that following an iterative process, the layout was amended, and there's no impact on the root protection zones, and I think the report covers that point in 6.25 and 6.26. And finally, in terms of the drainage information, the initial comments from the council's drainage officer requested a drainage strategy, which was provided. There was no objection in principle. Additional information relating to greenfield runoff and urban creep was requested and provided. The response, the council's officer took a view from the lead local flood authority. They found that their approach was acceptable. So any additional information which covered the final calculations and the management plan, I think I noted that they would be secured through the condition. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any points of clarification from members before I open up debate? No? Okay. Any member would like to comment? Councillor Potts, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Officers have already commented on valid concerns that my fellow ward member, planning expert and residents have just made. I share them all, but I will try and limit revisiting these. You'll be pleased to hear. I also want to thank the case officer for addressing my many concerns in the lead up to this meeting, but a few further queries, if I may. The report confirms reliance on the private car and a change from an undeveloped field to a semi-domestic use. I'm not clear why these identified harms are considered acceptable in this case. So I have the following questions. Given the lack of footways, lighting, public transport, what constitutes a reasonable distance under policy 23D? And how does this site meet this test? My next question is, where a permanent change from open countryside to a semi-domestic use is acknowledged, what level of harm would be required to justify refusal?
I think we can comment on the proposal before us, Councillor Potts, not what a different scheme might be. This scheme before us is considered to be acceptable and meet those policy requirements. It's 200 metres to the built-up area boundary. The officer has acknowledged its shortfalls, but the tilted balance applies here. And when we apply the tilted balance and look at those harms in the round, we end up with a recommendation for approval. So I think we've recognised those points. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say if a completely different site in a different context was a different distance, then that would meet a test, because that's not what we have before us. Thank you.
I'm happy to listen to the rest of the debate. Thank you.
Any other comments? Any other points from members? Councillor Clark, and I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Croker.
Thank you. Before I make my comments, could we put up the site as seen? Because I have a particular question before I make my comment. Yeah, okay. No, it was fine where you were.
There, the other one.
No, the other. Sorry, that.
There.
Fine. So, in the conditions, it is deemed that the landscape harm can be met by condition. Can you please explain to me how bunging 4 Gypsy Traveller pitches into this site, which is an open field with open views to the countryside, how can you mitigate that harm technically, please, before I continue?
So in the landscape officer assessment, they identified low to moderate harm, and any mitigation can be appropriately achieved.
We're not saying no harm, Chancellor Clark. I think there's always a balance with these things. I think, but obviously the technical assessment for the professional officer is that we've got low to moderate harm here. Obviously, we have got some trees. You know, we are seeking further landscaping. So I think the officer's view is the proposal is acceptable in that respect.
Thank you. Well, your definition and my definition, low to moderate harm, might be different. My initial comments actually apply to 3 of the agenda items, so I'll just cover them all at the same time. So item page 162, paragraph 6.1 to 6.3, page 185, paragraph 6.4 to 6.6, and page 211, paragraphs 6.8 to 6.10. 3 agenda items have got slightly different versions about the numbers behind the Gypsy and traveller needs in the write-ups. The impression given by the documentation is that we in fact need 128 plots, which is covered in some of the documents, and this is actually not clear. This number comes from a creation of a mix of people who meet the planning definition for this group, 79, with an undetermined group of 0 to 20, and 29 that do not meet the planning definition for this group. I quote report, Opinion Research Services, Horsham Borough Council, November 2023. I refer to the version on page 162, 6.1, 6.2, where it says there is a need for 93 pitches. However, this is contradicted by the expert advice on a subsequent document, which came out in the middle of 2024, which says that the number is far less. This is contradicted where it's 50 pitches is referred to in paragraph 6.2 for the period 2023 to 2027. And that's where the 50 pitches comes from. There's a further suggestion that a further 11 is based on a guess and not on evidence. When I refer to the statement that was made that we would need 60 pitches between 2023 and 2028, I don't know where that number comes from, because the table clearly says 50 is needed from 2023 to 2027 and 10 from the period 2028 to 2032. If I take 10 and divide it by that number, I make it 2, so it's 52 are needed, not what was said. My understanding is that so far I had 36 pitches have been done, not 34, but 34, 36. So technically we're actually looking for 14 pitches in the period to 2027. But we have 37 sites that are on the ground that are there. They're not official, they're not licensed, they're not approved. So technically, if they all came to committee, we'd have way over the number. So the tilted balance, I hear what you're saying, but it's not that tilted because the numbers are already there for more than providing the number of pitches that we need. The Opinion Research Services advice and guidance is that in effect, contrary to what was said in the documentation, or at least the impression that was given in those paragraphs, that the changes as to who is a member of a Gypsy and Travellers community would have little or no impact on the numbers. The paper concludes that the impact of the Lisa Smith judgment would be net zero. So it's the only way I can describe it, because it says +2 in one hand and -2 on the other, so net zero. So basically the paper dated 12th of July 2024 refers to this fact and confirms the total. So the numbers, the tilted balance on the numbers are in fact a lot lower than we think. And in fact, these are the numbers that are actually backing papers through our plan that's under, examination at the moment. So I question whether the appetite for these sites is really as much as we are purporting it to be.
Just briefly, I know my colleague here sat to my right, Guy, did have this conversation with our strategic planning colleagues recently who keep all the data, which is why we provided this up-to-date slides and the information that my colleague set through. So that is the most up-to-date position, and that's changed, you know, by a very recent permission that's been granted in April. So this is the up-to-date position. We are in the tilted balance. We have a shortfall. You can't have You can't be a little bit in the tilted balance. You are in the tilted balance. That, you know, it doesn't become a little bit less if you get a little bit closer. We, you know, by definition, we have a shortfall, and therefore the policy assessment set out within the report remains the case. Thank you.
If I can come back, yeah, but what the point I'm trying to make is the shortfall is not as clear as perhaps the three different versions in the three different in the three sections of this report say. It's not that clear, and the point is, yes, we're in a tilted balance, but there are more than 30 sites out there that should be coming for planning permission, and that we should be pursuing to get them legalized, if you want, to address this issue.
Just briefly, you know, they don't have permission. You know, they're not. If they don't have permission for whatever reason, that sits outside of the remit of what we're dealing with today. We're dealing with the fact that we have a shortage of our numbers, and that's where we are. We're not dealing in a situation where sites out there may or may not get permission moving forward. You know, I recognise the point Councillor Clark is making, but we have to determine the application on the basis of we are today. And my colleague set out in detail what we understand the need to be, and that follows conversations with our strategic planning colleagues in the last couple of days. And that's what we understand the position to be, and that's why we provide you with this updated information. Thank you.
Any other member wishing to comment? Oh yes, Councillor Croker, forgive me, I forgot, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Travelling west out along West End Lane, obviously preferably by bicycle, perhaps on foot, one is struck by a gap in dwellings that appear, especially on the south side of the lane. And as you get past the site we're talking about today, probably 50, 100 metres further on, there's a whole group of housing on the south side of the lane. And that sort of caused me to wonder, why the gap? Possibly I found the answer by looking at the government's flood map, which shows significant surface water flooding on the south side of West End Lane in the gap between the existing housing, including a reasonable amount on this site. So I really would like to see this drainage tied up before we make any approvals. So I'm minded to put a motion to defer this until the drainage report has been completed to our satisfaction. Thank you.
I'll come back to you in a moment with that. If you wish to put that motion forward, Councillor Clark. Councillor Croker, sorry, apologies, Councillor Clark.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Before we move on, any other comments on that, please? Councillor Livingston, yes.
So at the moment, we do have a number of sites occupied in excess of what we required to meet our so-called, well, the requirements. What are we doing to pursue those sites which are sitting there at the moment, possibly illegally? Are we trying to progress them, retrospective planning permission, or are we putting enforcement actions on them? Because I think, we've got the sites there, and if you add up the numbers, we shouldn't be considering this site if those were all approved.
Just briefly, because it's not a matter for today and for this planning committee, so I don't want to get caught up in a matter that's not material to the assessment of this application. I did speak to another councillor earlier, and I will take that away, because my understanding from what I can recall, when strategic planning did all of the assessment work as part of the Egyptian travelling assessment, that point was picked up. Now, what I don't know is what then happened, but it's not material for today. But I have discussed it, and I will take that away. And I recall there were conversations at the time. And obviously what I can't say is whether they all are gypsy and traveller sites or not, or whether they still, I don't know any of that information. And that is not material to this particular application. Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question, if I may, before I come to you, Councillor Croker. Pre-commencement condition, council number 3. No development shall commence until a drainage strategy detailing proposed means of foul and surface water disposal has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. Development should be carried out in accordance with the approved scheme. Just a question for the officers. Do you consider this, that as it's about drainage and it's about surface water disposal, do you think this goes to the heart of the application?
You would have to assess it at the time. I think, and again, I that's not material to the assessment of this planning application. What essentially you're asking, if there's a breach of planning control and they don't discharge that condition, whether the permission would be lawful. So whilst I recognise your question, I think it's a bit unfair to ask it here. The point is the condition is enforceable. And obviously if there is a breach of planning control, we would have to assess it at that moment in time. It's a valid question, but I don't think this is the appropriate forum for it. Sorry, Chairman.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just, Councillor Croker.
Can I comment on his proposal though, Chairman? Do you mind?
We've not heard the wording, but you,
okay.
By all means, come back.
Just sorry, Chairman, I didn't get a chance to comment on what Councillor Croker said before. I recognise the point around drainage. I think the difficulty is we do have to be consistent with our decisions for all application types. It's pretty standard practice to have the principles of a drainage scheme established and considered as part of a scheme, as has been the case here, and then require further details by condition. And we can't ask for information within a planning application that it is not required and could be covered by condition, providing in principle an acceptable drainage strategy could be secured. I do understand the concern, but my concern is that it's not necessarily a reasonable approach. Thank you.
Councillor Coker.
To which I would perhaps reply, even when there's an established risk. That's the point here. We're not talking about a site that doesn't have blue all over it at certain times.
Okay, I'm going to.
Did you want me to? Thank you. We do have a technical expert comment here, and obviously there has been some discussion around further information. Yes, there is a risk, but obviously that's a risk that the drainage officer is aware of. So I think we have to be mindful, and I think you have to consider those comments, and therefore consider, well, why are you seeking more? And maybe you've got reason, but why are you considering more than what our technical consultee has said is necessary at this stage, and considers the further details can be considered by condition? I think that's something members just need to be mindful of. Thank you.
Councillor Crowe. Okay, Councillor Franklin, sorry.
Thanks, Chair and Vice Chair. Something perhaps would just help clarify for me is the issue around tilted balance, and I'd just be interested to know how the weight of the tilted balance applies in this sort of site, a gypsy and traveller site versus a non-gypsy and traveller site. Is it the same, or is there a different level of weighting because of the nature of the application?
It is the same tilted balance in terms of what's the exact wording? The significant and demonstrable. It's the same test in terms of the tilted balance, but obviously you have a different policy context. So it's the same level of balance essentially. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Croker, do you still wish to put your motion forward?
I think I'm probably deferred.
Sorry?
Sorry. No.
Okay. Any other further comments on this particular application? No? Therefore, we go to the vote. Vote is to approve planning permission subject to appropriate conditions. All those in favour, please show.
I have 5 for.
All those against? We can't press 5 again.
5-4. 5 against. 5 against.
Oh. Oh, abstain, sorry. Any abstentions?
2 abstentions.
Okay, do I go the same way? I have this is very, very challenging for me because I do have some, I'm conflicted by some of this, in so much as some of the pre-commencement conditions. In particular, I know the officers will probably disagree. I think to ask for documentation prior to commencement that could have been provided well in advance of this application, and one could have argued it should have been sought at validation, does cause me some concern, because what it's in fact doing is that it's come to committee for decision, for us to make a decision, and yet we are saying, well, we decide as far as this, but we hand all this back to the officers to consider this documentation. So in effect, we're being asked to make a decision, then our decision is actually, you make the decision later when you've got this information. So I am somewhat conflicted by this, hence my view on to refuse it. What's our position if we can I see? Okay, I am going to stick with my original condition, and that residual position, sorry, and I am going to refuse the application. Therefore, the application is refused.
No,
The recommendation.
The motion fails.
Sorry, I get my words correctly. The motion has failed. Apologies for clarity. The motion has failed. We now need a further motion, so I'm going to take up Mike Croker's position and say that we defer this for further information presented to committee on the drainage strategy detailing the proposal means of foul and surface water disposal, and that should be submitted to committee. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Okay. Do all those in favour please show? All those against? Any abstentions?
None against.
Okay, therefore, and I'll be clear here, so I'm very clear, the motion has been carried and the application is being deferred for further information on the drainage strategy detailing proposed means of foul and surface water disposal has been submitted and approved by committee. Is that okay? Sorry. Be okay? Okay, sorry. So this application has been deferred. Thank you very much. Thank you.
One last change.
Okay, before we proceed, we've gone past 8:30. The next council meetings should not exceed 3 hours without the consent of the councillors present at the meeting. Therefore, we need to consider whether we want to continue, because we have 3 further applications and 40 minutes of public speaking, and then we've got to debate those. I'll seek advice on how we put this forward, and I'll come back to you in a second. Anyone put forward a motion, sorry, on this particular item. Yes, Councillor Trollope.
A suggestion, I mean, maybe we could do one more, but that doesn't involve 40 minutes of speakers.
No, sorry. We've gone beyond 3 hours. The vote is, do we wish to, so I'm putting forward the motion, do we wish to consider continuing with the 3 further applications on the planning committee this evening?
We do have 5 applications on the next agenda, committee members, so just be mindful of what the impact is on. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do anything, but I've literally finalised the agenda. So just be mindful of the impact in terms of when those applications need to come forward. Thank you.
So repeat the motion. We could have a special meeting should we need to do so.
That. Second that. Or third.
No, we've not put it forward as a motion yet. The motion is, do we wish to continue with 3 further applications this evening? All those in favour, please show. Continuing. If you vote now, you are voting to continue.
Chair, is it possible to comment on your motion?
Yes.
Thank you. In which case, I look behind me and I see the good public have waited quite a while for this. And I think we owe it to them to continue. That would be why I vote for a continuation.
Just to add the alternative comment, which is we want to have a proper discussion, and I think we want to debate and discuss this with full seriousness and our full attention. And I worry in general meetings we have huge debates about the first items, and it shrinks and it shrinks and it shrinks. And if members are saying that they feel that they've debated enough, I don't think that we'll give the public the full attention that they deserve to these planning matters.
The members of the public were advised prior to the meeting that there would be a vote if it went on past 8:30. So the motion is, I need a seconder for this, I forgot. Do we wish to continue to deal with the remainder of the applications on the committee report this evening? All those, do I have a seconder for that?
We can clear what the motion
Right.
is, please.
Okay.
Are you voting this is for the lot, or are you going to take it one by one?
Oh, okay.
You have a motion.
Oh gosh,
The
could someone?
motion is to adjourn.
Okay. I will get it right in a moment. The motion is to adjourn the meeting. Simple as that. Past 3 hours, and the motion is to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Okay. All those in favour, please show.
Eight to 4.
All those against?
Five against.
Okay, on that basis then. So, Councillor Murphy. Yes.
That we make a separate special meeting to hear the adjourned business.
We can certainly try. Obviously, it does depend on other meetings in the council diary and availability, and you've got the elections and things like that coming up. But we can try. Thank you.
Therefore, the meeting is adjourned. Sincere apologies to members of the public who sat patiently there for nearly 3.5 hours. I do apologise for not continuing, but we want to have open and reasoned debate. Thank you. What's the time?
8:44.
Therefore, at 20:44, I bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.